catch it. Okay, I think we're at 8:30. And we're missing a few of our commissioners, so we'll give them another minute here. Good morning to everybody. It's nice to see your faces. Okay, we are now at 8:31, and I see 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of us. I know that one of us was not going to be available today. That's John Bouchard. We've got quite a few people missing, if I see this correctly. Is there anybody that you know that's not on that maybe some of you can text to try and get them on? I think we're missing Deborah, Kadena. We got Jeff. We're missing Jeff. He's key.
Lapis. Ashner. Yeah. No, there we are. Hi, Alex. Sorry about that.
And Snyder. There's Jeff. Great. Okay. Just want to check to make sure we've got a quorum. Than CalRecycle can due to their requirements so that are under law. So if you need to watch the video again, you can on our YouTube page. Commissioners, again, please use the asterisks in the box so we're fair. I'm going to work very hard to make sure under Robert's Rules of Order, it's the chair's responsibility to make sure that passed in 2017 in California that requires state agencies to follow accessibility standards for I'm to email to get it direct. We cannot go through CalRecycle to get them posted. If we go through, we can do that, but it will take them a lot of time. More user-friendly because I think it's actually resulting in less transparency rather than more, and it's an unintended consequence. I would love to work with you on that because I think this is becoming a major thing that's slowing us down and frustrating commissioners and the public alike. And I know our goal is to keep everything transparent. So the public, you will see things today, reports out from committees that you haven't seen before. We apologize. We tried to get them posted, and because of the accessibility law, we could not do that in time. There just isn't enough bandwidth. So with that, I will go ahead and we will start the meeting, and we will call to order and do the roll call. So I'll start with the roll call. I know John Bouchard is not with us today. He's going to try and jump on later. He had a pre-existing commitment, and we hopefully will see him later in the day. If not, he'll get to watch the video. So the next person on the agenda or the list of commissioners is Deborah Cadena. Are you on? See you. Great. John Davis, you're on?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you. And Commissioner Dell?
Present.
And Commissioner Dunleavy?
Good morning, here.
Good morning. Commissioner Ferrante?
Here.
Commissioner Kalpikoff?
Here.
Great. Commissioner Lapis? I don't see him. Maybe somebody can text him, see if he's okay.
Did you say,
Commissioner-
sorry, good morning, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Great. Okay, thanks, Nick. Commissioner Medrano?
Here.
Great. Commissioner Segura?
Here, good morning.
Good morning. And Commissioner Potashner? Great, thank you. And I'm here. Commissioner Schneider? Is she on? I don't see her. Okay.
She's actually trying to get on. I just sent her the link.
Oh, great.
Chairperson Sanborn.
Okay. Somehow my GoToMeeting just went blind. And now I cannot see you, but I'll keep calling the names. Commissioner Sky?
Here.
Commissioner Toyota?
Here.
Commissioner Valle?
Morning, Commissioners, present.
Or Ward?
Here.
Okay, great. Now, for some reason, literally the entire thing just went blank on me, and I have no idea why. There you are. Okay. So thank you for that. We are now at 8:39, a little behind, but we'll catch up. The next item, agenda item number 2, is the review and potential approval of the meeting notes. Does anybody have any amendments to the meeting notes, or would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Commissioner Ward?
I'll move to approve both meeting notes.
I'll second.
Great. First and seconded. All of you say aye
Aye.
if you approve,
Aye.
and thumbs up.
Aye.
Great. Is there anybody who does not approve of the meeting minutes? Okay, then we'll take that as unanimous approval. Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is public comment review on items not on the agenda. This is the section where we cannot respond to these comments, but we certainly can refer comments to committees or get them on a future agenda item or a future agenda. So with that, I'll ask CalRecycle, are there any public comments on items not on the agenda?
Yes, Heidi. And sorry, just to clarify, you mentioned you did not want to read public comments today, or you do?
I think we want to read the ones that were not posted.
We post every single comment, so
Automatically?
yes.
Okay. Are there any that just came in the last few minutes?
Um,
Because we can't read them while they're coming in.
no, not in the past few minutes.
So I will ask the commissioners, is this okay with you that we not read everything into the meeting, or do you want any of these read? My suspicion is that you didn't want them read so that we could stay on top of the agenda with a lot of policy recommendations coming to the commission today. Any thoughts? Is everybody okay moving on? Okay. I'm seeing thumbs up. Is there anybody who disagrees with that? Okay. Then we'll just go ahead and proceed this way. If we decide that we want to go back and read things into the record, we certainly can. But Commissioner Valle and I will go ahead and look at all of them and make sure they're all getting referred to the proper committees. Very good. And that will move us on to be a lot faster. So now we'll move on to agenda item number 4, discussion and response to previous public comments and expanded public proposals. So this is where any of the committee chairs that have had a large public, expanded public proposal or comment that you would like to respond to in public now on the process that you're making in responding to them, you're welcome to say those things now. So I'll start with Commissioner Potashner. Is there anything you wanted to report out in responding to comments you received for the Organics Committee?
No, not at this time.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Davis for Market Development, or is there anything you would wish to respond to?
Well, we've received a number of comments about carpet and carpet collection strategies. So, yeah, the committee has begun working on some recommendations around carpet. Also, comments specifically on incorporating recovered dimensional lumber into engineered wood and using asphalt shingles in a pilot paving operation. So we've also begun researching those issues, as well as kind of peripheral comment on the carpet side to look at other flooring types. So trying to get our arms around the different flooring options that are not covered through an existing program in California. And I'm going to turn up my volume, sorry.
All right, so you are considering those comments, and I know the one comment we got on Monday was we should ask CARE to present, but I just want to put it out there for any committee and any public commenter. We could ask you for responses in writing so that we're not consuming a lot of committee time with oral responses, but actual specific responses to questions. So that's another way we are getting information. Thank you for that. Was there anything else, Commissioner Davis?
No, there was a comment that had to do with potentially toxic or unhealthy materials in carpet, which is a little different bent than what we've been dealing with. So we'll have to bring that one back as well. But I'm not sure if any of the other committees are focused specifically on toxic or dangerous materials.
Actually, that's a really good question, and we've seen several comments come in the last few days regarding toxics and HHW, and we should discuss and give direction to the Vice Chair and I as to how you would like those referred, because it's not really clear to me where they would go, which committee would receive them. Some impact markets, some impact recycling and recyclability. Are there any thoughts from commissioners on that?
Yeah.
Is that Commissioner Valle?
Yeah, Commissioner, Madam Chair, Alameda County has been at the forefront of a lot of issues. And one of them has been the household hazardous waste facilities that we have at most of the transfer stations throughout the county. And then there are also facilities in other areas where residents can bring paint, aerosol cans, anything that's underneath the sink or underneath the bathroom sink and the kitchen sink, other HHW things, and that's funded through a tipping fee at the landfill. And that's received enormous credibility and tremendous turnout from people throughout Alameda County. And we're always referring people to those. I don't know if we have those statewide, but I would think that that would be an important area where if we increase the visibility of those facilities statewide, would complement a lot of the questions that people are asking us about all of those materials that are not recyclable. They can't find a home for them. But if you have an HHHW facility at your transfer station or landfill, it takes care of it. So I think we need to refer that whole issue to a committee.
I agree. I guess I'm not sure which committee. And I see a few commenters here. It looks like maybe Commissioner Ward, you're next.
Yeah, I have a suggestion for a future agenda item discussion because I totally agree that there are areas that of expertise that we need to be incorporating into our deliberations, but it's a challenge because it's already challenging to manage what we have. So I'd like to explore that further, but it'll be a suggestion for a future agenda item, which I believe is later in the agenda.
So no suggestion on where to refer it, but that we should discuss it under new agenda items. Okay. Commissioner Toyota.
I think maybe the labeling and education committee might be a good place to start with that. Maybe we can label them basically out of the recycling system and into and educate on some of the places you can take them.
So, and I'm not sure, I mean, to me, it's a labeling issue, but it's also really a need for source reduction, and it's a contamination issue to organics, to recycling. So I almost wonder if there's a couple of us that might want to do a subcommittee, but we can discuss that maybe at the end of the agenda. So when we go to the new agenda items, I think we should maybe take it up there so we can all think about it for the next little bit. Does that sound good? Okay, fantastic. Commissioner Davis, are you finished for your report?
I am.
Okay, very good. And Commissioner Dunleavy, do you want to report? Are there any responses to comments you want to share with us from the Recycling Committee on the major proposals? Go ahead.
Yes, public comment portals work very well. We've received a lot of comments. I'll get to those when I do my report out. But the general response back on the comments has been concern about what our committee is going to identify as recyclable in California. And the focus of the committee was to improve the quality of material coming through the curbside programs, to simplify the programs, to accept material that's currently recyclable. It has markets. It's accepted at curbside programs. It's something that you could take to a recycling center. It has market demand. We know that the material will be converted into a new item. So we've gone by the guidelines of Public Resources Code 42370.2. So we've looked at those 7 criteria, and we received a lot of comments about, we want to keep our item labeled as recyclable. But our focus is what's recyclable in a curbside program, and is the material actually separated out at the MRFs and not run through a system, put in, put in with other material that requires secondary processing, and through that secondary processing, the outcome of that material is unknown. As an example, you might have an aerosol container that ends up with aluminum cans. It's a contamination when the bale of aluminum cans goes to the mill. The material in the aerosol can might be rejected because it's a different alloy than the aluminum cans. The same could be said for foil going in with an aluminum can bale. So we looked at the criteria, and we're identifying what is recyclable today, not what could be recyclable tomorrow. We wanted to look at a list that could hopefully be a recommended list and provide all the jurisdictions an opportunity, and I think Commissioner Ward said, to do a big reset, get back to what has markets today, what is marketable, and what the facilities can generate is high quality. We do also have items that could be a local ad. If local programs have specialized equipment, whether it's to sort a PP5 or an aseptic carton, those are items that they could continue to accept on a local basis, but on a statewide basis, maybe not recognized as recyclable in California at this point. And then hopefully those manufacturers will come to California and create higher demand, higher value for that material, so more programs could add those materials so they pay for the collection and processing, and it's not completely borne by the consumers or the haulers or the processors. So hopefully they create demand where there is value for that material, so more programs will add additional items in the future. But we wanted to limit the list to what meets the criteria today, and then in the hopes that the manufacturers of material that want to be recyclable in California come here with solutions, demand, and material value, so more programs will add those. And then one of the items that we've discussed and we'll have a presenter talk about is we have the list that we're going to be recommending today, but the follow-up will be identifying a pathway if a product is not on the list today, how they get on the list in the future. So we'll be addressing those at future meetings, but that's my call out at this point.
Thank you very much. And I know we've seen quite a few emails and even one this morning about aerosol cans and should they be in or out, or are there data matching? And so that committee is responding to all those comments, and we greatly appreciate your hard work because there's been a lot of hard work.
And I think I responded to as many, if not all, of the comments that have come in, and I've asked follow-up questions for people that have concerns about their products, and specifically the areas where a lot of material are falling short. Are the MRFs actually separating those items separately, or are they commingling them with another product? The recycling centers that can accept them, what the material value is for that material, and where the markets are. I've had one stakeholder say, well, there's a market in Mexico that could take some of the material, and maybe a market in Minnesota that could take some. It just didn't sound like an active market. If somebody has aluminum cans, they have many buyers. If they have mixed paper, they have many buyers. If they have cardboard, they have many buyers. But when the person representing the stakeholders is saying, well, there might be one or two facilities, that doesn't demonstrate a stable market where so that's what we're hoping to resolve, and we've asked the questions of those stakeholders to bring the information that we could add to the matrix and the evaluation, and that'll be part of the pathway to get onto the recyclable list in the future.
Great. And I think one of the things is that we're all challenged with is trying to make sure we at least agree on the facts about the acceptability, how many MRFs accept it, all that kind of stuff, because that seems to be one of the big questions that comes up. My data doesn't agree with your data. So that's why we'll have to ferret some of this out a little bit. And Commissioner Lapis, you had some comments?
Yeah, I just want to actually follow up on that specific point. I mean, Jeff really captured it pretty well. The one thing I wanted to add is with the extra 6 months that the legislature is giving us for final recommendations, it actually creates a great opening that we can say, here's what we know is recyclable in the whole state. If you're a MRF operator and you have markets for other things, please let us know. If you're a local government and you think something else should be on the list, please let us know. If you're a manufacturer and you have evidence that your material is recyclable, let us know. And then the other one is, if you're a manufacturer and you have a path to get to recyclability quickly, you have to show it to us and prove it to us in the next, before the final recommendations are out in July. And I think that creates a good opportunity to engage with some of the manufacturers, because we don't want to preclude the recycling of some materials that could be recyclable and are on the verge of being recyclable. And that's what I think a lot of our comments have been about. But I totally agree with Jeff's approach. We need to start off with an honest statement of this is what is currently recyclable in the whole state. But, if you want to come to us and talk to us and explain why your product should be on the list, we should be open to have that conversation.
Thank you. And Commissioner Segura?
Just adding to to Nick's comment, and I think it's important when someone mentions where is the market, it's important to identify then how much volume can that market handle, right? And then of the volume that they're handling, how much of it is actually going into products. So just a quick example, right? If someone says there is a market, and I'll use the Mexico example, there's a market in Mexico that can handle 10 tons, but the state produces 5,000 tons. Well, really, we don't have a solution, right? And if there is a market in Mexico that can take the 5,000 tons, but they only recycle 10% of it, and the remainder is not utilized, well, is that really a functioning market? And so I just think as folks and opinions come in, and they identify market, it's really going through the whole step, right? Where is it? How much can it handle? What's it being utilized, and how much of it is being utilized? I just think that's important to make sure as folks send in their ideas, because I'm concerned that someone does say, look, I mean, we found a place in X country, X state that can handle something, and what they can handle is such low volumes that it really doesn't resolve the issue, and we have a problem. So.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's kind of part of what we've been dealing with, is that we were told there were markets overseas, and then found out a lot of it was being mishandled, and et cetera. So I really appreciate the commissioners doing their due diligence on this, and the stakeholders for giving us their comments and making sure we're all working off the most accurate data. So is there anything else, Commissioner Dunleavy, you want to talk about? Okay, very good. Thank you for that report out. And then I believe...
With a comment?
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Davis. And then Ward.
Oh, just real quick. Yeah, so I've been reviewing a report from the Recycling Steering Committee for the state of Oregon. They're kind of doing similar tasks that we are. But the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality has for some time kind of grappled with this issue, and it's mentioned again in the report, and what is statewide, and then what other materials might be recyclable under different circumstances. So it just wanted to call that out and share that with the Recycling Committee. It might be an approach that you want to consider over time to see what Oregon has been doing as far as an approach, not necessarily the specific material.
Commissioner Ward, did you cancel your comment, or do you want to say?
I guess I need to voice this because I think it particularly pertains to the assertion of plastics recycling, because the reality is that plastics are produced by petroleum byproducts combined with natural gas. As long as we have a petroleum-driven global economy, there will always be more plastics trying to find their ways into some kind of products. So the drive of the production of plastics has really nothing at all to do with the demand for those resins once they're finished their useful life in products or packaging. So I don't believe there's actually any practical way there will ever be enough demand for post-consumer plastics to be able to reach the overall goals of realistically being recycled for other than PET and HDPE and other things that have been established as marketing. The other less common plastics or more durable plastics, I'm just not seeing the potential or the demand that would make those recyclable commodities under California rules. So I'm just putting that out there as that's what I'm seeing.
I'll just add to that, that recyclability is only one of the criteria we've been given as commissioners to measure. The other is greenhouse gas reduction, and plastics come from fossil fuels. And this is something that we need to keep top of mind as well. So great. I think unless there's any other comments on that portion, we can move on to Commissioner Dell. Do you want to give, are there any comments you want to respond to that were sent to your Labeling and Market Public Education Committee?
So in our last committee meeting on September 21st, we went through each of the public comments that had been received, and
construction, demolition debris, carpeting, asphalt roofing, shingles, and drywall added to their list of areas of responsibility. So that could additionally change as well. Continuing to scroll down. Again, these are the charges of each committee. The Organics Committee is responsible for clarifying what's compostable, considering policies pertaining to California's landfill methane emission reduction goals and associated with rescue organics. So, scrolling down, you see similar descriptions for the other committees, saying these are the primary forums for initial discussions, but that all policies in the main body of the document have been approved by the whole. So on the 75% thing, again, we're trying to be as succinct as we possibly can. One of the questions immediately in the first paragraph is, where are we currently in terms of the recycling rate? It appears that the most recent data we have in 2018 was at 40%, and the trend was definitely going down, and that was before COVID. So I think it's really safe to say we're well below 40% in the year that we were supposed to be at 75%. Not very good news, not very good trend, but part of our challenge is addressing facts as they are, figuring out the best way to move forward. So here we are, and I would like to specifically ask CalRecycle, what is your best estimate for our number in 2020? Please, as soon as we can get it, I'd like to include that in this report. We respect it. So
we were told by Deputy Director Heller that they plan on releasing the 2019 number in December. So it will be before our report is due, but it is interesting to me that it's taking an entire year to calculate that number, because when we ask carpet and mattresses and these folks to calculate their numbers, the latest I think they get is till August of the year following. So it's just, you know, it's hard for us to stay on top of things when the data's coming so late. So that could be a question we ask of CalRecycle on why the turnarounds are taking so long.
So these, I've incorporated some of the charts that were included in earlier presentations about the status, showing where we're at. And you can see that, again, landfilling is over half of what we've done in 2018, and the trends have continued in a downward direction. Scrolling down, furthermore, a significant portion of those are organic materials, and I mentioned that they're potent greenhouse gas. We can give more detail if you wanted on that, but I know that the Organics Committee will include that report. So now we give an overview about how did we get here. I'm again trying to give broad brush general description.
Just, yeah, I guess procedural question for Commissioner Ward. First of all, I think it'd be very helpful if we could all receive a copy of this and be able to refer to it as it's updated.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking though, within the Bagley-Keene dynamic, it seems like since communication directly between commissioners about commission business is somewhat limited by Bagley-Keene, maybe that should go through the CalRecycle staff, and then any suggested revisions we have can go back to CalRecycle staff. Otherwise, we're going to be dealing with this, just wordsmithing this constantly
Well, my understanding was that I was already in the role of trying to help each of the committees bring their sections as developed in the committees into the report. And I'd be happy to do that. I don't feel like there's any violation of Bagley-Keene because I am not influencing that content. I'm merely dropping it into the structure.
Yeah, the committee part I understand. I think in your involvement one-on-one with the committee chair or committee, that's fine. It's more, the narrative where you ask for, are there any changes we want to the narrative? I think that's the part that we struggle with possibly if we. I'm not sure how you intend.
I'll make a suggestion. I was going to suggest this is that CalRecycle help Ted actually make this accessible and without having to PDF it because it's not getting posted yet, and email it to everyone in Word who's on the commission so all of them can track changes and individually send it back to Ted so he can kind of figure out how to pull all those comments together and update this document before the next meeting. Is that possible, CalRecycle staff?
Hi, Heidi. This is Paulina. Just so I'm clear, the ask is to work with Ted on making the draft outline, this document accessible?
No, to email it directly to all the commissioners. Well, yes, to make it accessible for the public and post it, since this is what we're seeing right now and people have a right to see that. That was the whole point. But also to then email the Word version to each commissioner and ask for their track changes response to Ted by, I don't know, 3 days from now, next Monday, something like that, so that he has time to look at all those comments and he and I can figure out how to incorporate and finalize the document before the next meeting. We have to be able to communicate in enough way that the commissioners, if they can't see this document before the meetings, and then they can't get a copy of it and help us track changes and provide feedback, it's very hard for us to make sure everybody's thoughts are incorporated into the document, and we're trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, Heidi, we agree that this is, of course, very important. So we'll work with staff and identify a solution so that we can get this around, and we'll circle back with you after this meeting so we can figure out the best way to do that.
Right.
Yeah, we have a standing call, the team and Richard and I, after each commission meeting. So we will discuss this very issue, and hopefully we can get this all out to you and give you a deadline to give us track changes response. But I think if we do this in bites, it'll be a lot easier than trying to do the whole report at the same time. So thanks I want to thank Ted because he's really put a lot of work into this. I've just been doing editing and it really has helped tremendously. And I think brick by brick we'll get there a lot quicker. Are there any other comments? Okay, so let's fingers crossed we can figure out a legal way to get the documents out for everybody to comment on.
I see a comment from Mr. Lapples.
I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry, I turned off my video because my internet connection just isn't good enough. We had talked about early on sort of having things in a Google Doc and all editing one Google Doc and then making sure that they're posted, the drafts are posted as we're working on them for the public to review, but having a working document. Is there any way we can go back to that plan? Because it'll be I think we'll have a much better work product if we can comment on each other's comments and work on something together rather than all of us going through and making changes and sending them to Ted, and then he's going to get conflicting changes from different people. And
I agree. I mean, that was my initial idea, and this whole transparency thing has actually made it harder to be transparent, ironically. So I don't know, Zoe, is that possible? Do we know if we can do a public Google Doc and only allow commissioners to track changes and comment?
I don't know. We will look into it, and we'll get your response as soon as possible. I mean, from a functional perspective, it sounds like a great idea, but we'll have to look into it as far as how it aligns with Bagley-Keene. And as mentioned, we'll come up with as many options as we can to make this an easier process.
So I would just say that I feel like it's definitely consistent with the spirit of Bagley Keene, and we let the public see everything we're working on. I mean, maybe we could even have a live link that people can see but not make changes. So it definitely conforms with the spirit of Bagley Keene.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure we need CalRecycle's legal blessing for every single thing we do. So I definitely trust our chair and vice chair to guide us on that.
Sure. I mean, the issue is whether it's two things. It's Bagley Keene, and then whether or not we can host it on our website. So those are the two issues that we need to look into, and we'll get back to the group.
And it could be that maybe, you know, one of us hosts it on our own page, but it's public. Is on, you know, I don't know. We'll have to talk about it, but we have to be very careful too, because we're already getting, you know, some critiques about, are we being fair the way we're saying things and this and that. And I know that we are coming up with some real recommendations that are going to make some folks uncomfortable, and we want to make sure we're following the law to the T to protect everybody. So thanks for bringing that up, Nick. I appreciate it. We'll talk to Zoe after this meeting and see if we can think through how we do this. Are there any other comments on the draft report? I know it's hard to see, so, and we can only see bits at a time. So we'll get back to you on this, and I want to thank Commissioner Ward again for all his hard work. We'll continue on, and hopefully at every meeting we'll have new updates to this. Okay, so we are now at 9:25, and we're ahead of schedule. So we can go ahead and do now agenda item 6, update on legislation, which is timely because it's actually affecting our reporting deadlines. So I think, Mindy, are you on the line to give us an update on legislation, please?
Yep. Hopefully you see me. Hi there.
Yeah.
You know, these are the same bills that I talked to you about a little while ago. All the bills affecting recycling were signed. There were no vetoes in our world. And so happy to answer any questions, but just to go through them quickly again, AB 107 was a budget trailer bill that had lots of provisions, but the one affecting CalRecycle extends the bottle bill quarterly report to a biannual report. So every 6 months instead of every quarter, we will be reporting on the status of the beverage container recycling fund. Pretty straightforward there. CalRecycle plans to submit our quarterly reports through Q4 and then start in the January where we normally report quarterly to start reporting in that biannual period. Then there's 793, AB 793, which is a team bill that established minimum content requirements for beverage containers, plastic beverage containers, 15% by 2022, 25% by 2025, and 50% by 2030. As far as we know, those are the best, or those are the most, why am I losing my words right now? They're the most aggressive minimum content standards in the world. So that's awesome that we got that one through. With a lot of support actually from the industry, which was also good in the end. Okay, the one that most affects the commission is AB 2287. As mentioned, it sounds like everyone is aware that it extended the deadline for the recommendations from January to July. It also specifies that the commission needs to have provide for public review of the recommendations. And it also specifically specifies that those can be shared with the legislature. The recommendations can be shared with the legislature. 2287 also had a couple other provisions that mainly align with what's going on in the world anyway. Reference to a name for compostable material, which company makes that compostable material now, and labeling for things like marine degradable, which there is no standard, so it strikes the reference to that in statute. It also extended the time frame for amusement parks to comply with 827, which has to do with making sure there's an organics bin adjacent to a recycling bin. We kind of feel like that has a minimal impact given that most amusement parks are not open at the moment and are not likely to be for a little while. Then the last bill we talked about a little bit as well as 3187, and that has to do with the definition of biomethane, and it will require some future conversations, but as we discussed before, it doesn't really affect the recycling world that much. We just need to make sure that we are in the same place as the other statutes, and we're clear on that. Any questions?
Commissioners? I have one actually. If there's anybody who knows, is familiar with the AB 2287 issue about the amusement parks, I'm curious as to why that was taken up and what the issue was there. Because I think some amusement parks, when they are open, do create a lot of organics. So I wasn't sure why that was put in there. Does anybody know that?
I can talk about that. Mindy, would you like me to talk about it?
Sure. I'm happy to share what I know, but go ahead.
When the original McCarty bill was being signed, or when it was on the governor's desk, a specific amusement park company reached out and said that logistically they were worried that they could have composting bins everywhere, but they might have mobile food operations that might be near another composting bin, but not necessarily have one right next to them. And they logistically did not feel like they could comply with the wording of the law, although they did want to comply with the spirit of the law. And so there was a agreement to sort of have a cleanup where they could have a bin within the facility, within the vicinity. And that bill was introduced at the beginning of this year, but it was put on hold due to COVID. And so all that this does is delay the implementation for that sector until that issue is worked out.
How long do you think it will take to work that out? Are there any thoughts on that?
It should be next session. And so the delay is only until the end of next year.
Commissioner Osigura, you have a comment?
Just a question for Commissioner Lapis. Commissioner Lapis, just a quick question on that. What happens to a mobile source, say a vehicle that's selling food that stops at a corner and sells X? Do those containers need to be put on the corner when they're selling the food, or and just a question. I know you probably would know that. So
it's the provision for containers being added to 1826 and 341 to the existing commercial recycling and mandatory organics requirements. So if a business is already subject to MCR or more, then they also have to provide those bins for the customer, and food trucks would not be subject to either of those programs. I mean, I'm sure that there are some scenarios where they could be, but generally speaking, they wouldn't be.
Got it. Just raise the question for me. Thank you.
While we're on the subject, Nick, do you know anything about the, because I can remember when the parks were open and I went to the state fair, I was horrified at the amount of single-use plastic and waste and all that. Is that something that as a commission we should be addressing?
SB 1335 applies to the state fair.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry, it's hard to keep.
Yeah, the state fair and all fairs fall under 1335, so they should have to comply going forward. Not that that doesn't mean that single use won't be used, but it will at least need to be recyclable.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, are there any other thoughts on commissioners? I don't see any. Thank you, Mindy, for the update, and I guess we can breathe a little bit of relief. We've got a deadline extension for the final report. I still think that there's plenty we can get them January 1st to get them started on their 2-year session, and that tougher stuff, we've got a little more time to gnaw on and come up with very important recommendations for the legislature on and the CalRecycle. So thank you for the update. Appreciate it. All right, so now we can move on to agenda item number 7, and we are a few minutes early. We're excited today to, at 10 o'clock, we're going to be having Secretary Blumenfeld join us for half an hour. So my hope is that we can get at least 2 of our committee report outs done, or maybe 1 at least. And we'll start with organics, which should be the shortest one. If we have time, we'll take up market development, or we'll just take a break before Secretary Blumenfeld comes and then take the big ones, labeling and recycling at the end, because those have a lot of recommendations for us already. So we'll go ahead now and ask for a report out on organics from the chair of that committee, Commissioner Potashner.
Thank you very much. Just to remind the full commission, so far the Organics Committee has had specific meetings and presentations on compostable packaging, food rescue and waste prevention, as well as infrastructure permitting, financing challenges, and so forth. Have heard presentations from departments, subject matter experts that are stakeholders that are actually doing that work. What you're seeing before you is a draft. This isn't a final version of this, but this is something that related to compostable packaging that the committee would love to get some feedback on from the full commission. And it really comes from the place of SB 1335, as the commissioners know, is setting up what is going to meet that compostable or non-compostable list for state facilities. The committee is understanding that that will likely be the standard that we will be working off of going forward, and in 2026 it jumps up to 75%. But what 1335 does not deal with is something that has been discussed at length within our committee, is the constituent health, or what's in that, what's in the materials. PFAS and PFOA are two chemicals that have been very present in the news lately in terms of compostable materials. On the fiber side, we're seeing US EPA getting closer and closer to setting maximum contaminant levels for our drinking water on this issue, which we then anticipate will flow down to our compost facilities with our local water boards when it comes to our leachate, and probably CDFA too on the back end of the compost. So what you have before you here today is dealing with the upstream, which is how do we ensure that the products that are going to be compostable or labeled compostable that end up in our waste stream and end up at our compost facilities have at least met some level of screening when it comes to the constituents that are in that material. Right now we have very little transparency into what's in that, especially when it comes to issues around forever chemicals like PFAS, PFOA. We are more and more relying on third-party verification that tell us that they're doing certain things, but again, we have no real way of knowing. So what you have before you is, and I want to first call out Commissioner Sky for putting together this draft with Commissioner Lapis, the precautionary principle, which really focuses on a plausibility standard for this material and making sure that if there is even a chance or a plausible chance based on scientific data that the material, the constituents that are in these compostable materials could be harmful to people that are eating food from the food contact material or from compostable foodware, even as it flows through our compost facilities through finished end product, that there's a backstop there from a regulatory standard that it will not meet the definition of compostable. I'm trying to think of what else I got here. So what we're asking is the department to work with the other relevant departments, CDFA, OEHA, DTSC, to come up with a screening process, understand, get the relevant information we need from the producers of compostable packaging to make sure that at a regulatory level, they've been clear to be safe to be not only used with food packaging and foodware, but able to flow through our compost facilities. So I'm happy to take any questions. Commissioners Ward, Sky, Lapis, did I miss anything when it comes to this principle? Okay, I got a thumbs up from the main, all right. It's a 2-pager, it's a little dense. I understand it's a lot for folks to process right now, but if there's just general questions, happy to take them.
I'm not seeing any asterisk. Is there anybody that, I'll just say, I think this is great. I've just seen it. Can't read every word of it at this moment, but the general concept to me makes a lot of sense. Commissioner Ward?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I really appreciate Commissioner Sky and Lapis putting this together. On the Organics Committee level, my first impulse was to suggest something we might be able to all agree on, which was let's make sure that all the stickers and all produce in California is compostable. And essentially, my understanding is that Commissioner Sky and Lapis felt like this was a good place to start. Let's start identifying the things that make it a barrier to composting and start calling out those chemicals so that folks are recognizing the chemical basis, and then we can work up to things like, that's my understanding. But I think as a general precautionary principle, I really support this. I think it's a great idea. And when discussing the activities of the Commission with the Environmental Services JPA of the Regional Council of Rural Counties, I will be highlighting this as a sample policy because I think it's really well structured and it's a good item to discuss as a general.
Again, Commissioner, let's see, I've got Don Davis canceled. So Commissioner Sky?
I just want to really say thanks to all of the commissioners that provided positive feedback on this, and Commissioner Lapis for helping to come up with the draft. It really is designed to stay ahead of the next crazy chemical that comes into the waste stream that could create a lot of problems for composting, whether it's PFAS or some other chemical. It's always going to be tough for us to stay ahead when we're reacting, and this is a way to proactively address that and say anything that comes into contact with food should meet a safety standard before it's allowed.
Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Scott just may have answered my question. It had to do with food soil paper, which has been one of those vagaries in the 1383 world. And so food packaging would be, whether it ends up in the compost system or not, would be subject to this. Okay, thank you.
And I have a question. One of the things that I've always wondered is I have a neighbor who is a profuse user of Roundup, and I see all those organics going into the compost bin, and I worry. What is that compost being used for? How much Roundup is in that? How pervasive is it? And dangerous to food, dangerous to us. And are there any discussions in the committee about how to address the use of pesticides, herbicides, and other things that are ending up in the organic stream, that are ending up in composting facilities and may not be getting tested for, that could be persistent?
We haven't to date. What we can do as a committee is review the CDFA standards and testing protocols for finished compost and see if we can identify any holes, and we'll have a look at pesticides and see if right now we're not getting the coverage we need from the existing testing.
Water quality issues as well as obviously organics issues. If we use residential compost and there's been a lot of chemicals used, what danger do they pose, and should the precautionary principle apply there as well? Commissioner Lapis?
Heidi, that's a great point that I don't think we'd actually thought of. But I did get an email a couple of days ago from the U.S. Composting Council, and they are doing a webinar on this next week, specifically on persistent herbicides in compost. So I'm going to tune into that, and yeah, I suggest others do as well.
So if we're moving off of this topic, I just want to remind the Commission, this probably will not be the only policy coming when it comes to compostable packaging. We're still looking at labeling, and we'll likely have some conversations with the labeling committee going forward. I do expect to have some at least draft proposals when it comes to food rescue and infrastructure the next time we meet as a full commission. And While it's not posted our full schedule, the committee does intend to meet until through the end of the calendar year, and we will build out the rest of. We'll do our best to build out the rest of that calendar at the next committee meeting, so that it all can be posted, so the public can follow up.
Okay, great. I don't see any other comments here. So, and this document, is this able to be made accessible and posted or sent to the commissioners, CalRecycle? Is this, again, trying to be transparent? Audrey?
That's a question for me. Oh, God.
No, for the CalRecycle staff, sorry. I just assumed we'd all want to see this and be able to read it and have the public see it.
Yeah, this is Paulina from CalRecycle, and Laura chairs that committee, Laura Moreno. I don't believe she's on the call right now. Kobe, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. She was able to work with you on this document to make it accessible and get it posted.
That was my understanding. I haven't double checked.
Hi guys, this is Laura. I think my audio wasn't working actually. I was trying to just tell you guys. So a version of this and the other proposal are up on the public notice for the previous Organics Committee meeting that was September 21st.
Okay. So people who would just look for the commission meeting may not know that's where it is, and the commissioners might not either. So I just want to make sure everybody knows where it is, and then we can all go look at it and provide comments back to Commissioner Potashner, Sky, and Lapis, or just one, because we don't want to email more than two, for Bagley-Keene issues. So, well, thank you all. Great work, and really appreciate that update. Was there anything else, Commissioner Potashner, from your committee?
No, sorry, I was on mute there. No, nothing from me.
Good. And CalRecycle staff, could you pull up the spreadsheet we had started about when the different committees were going to deliver different products, just to make sure we're keeping that current, because originally we were going to see from organics, we had listed the impacts of compostable packaging, food rescue and waste prevention, organic products, procurement and market development, and infrastructure were all going to be delivered in October for the November 4th commission meeting. Commissioner Potashner, is that still on track? Do we want to change any of those dates?
Yeah, can you pull it up in front of me? It's hard to respond without it.
Sorry, CalRecycle, I had emailed you the link.
Oh, the thing you emailed, I was not able to access.
It was the, oh really? It was the link to your website. Okay, sorry, maybe I didn't get the right link. It's this spreadsheet that actually, lists the dates and when the commission committees had planned on reporting.
It looks good from here, Heidi.
Okay, very good. So by the end of the month. I mean, basically that's the question is it's hard to meet these deadlines that we originally set out. Now we have a longer deadline. So
yeah, I would say that the majority of, I think we'll have a further baked proposal on this, as well as initial proposals on food waste prevention and food rescue, as well as some initial proposals on infrastructure for the committee to look at by the end of the month. The full commission look at by the end of the month.
I think the low-hanging fruit recommendations, if they come first, so we can get those off in January, and then the ones that'll take us longer, we'll mull those over. Okay, thank you so much for the update. So we are now at...
Heidi?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Lapis.
I just want to say that the food waste prevention recommendations have been posted. We talked about them at the last meeting. They have been posted. It's a rough draft. It's really a straw proposal. So waiting for feedback from the experts, but it should be somewhere.
So somewhere on the website?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is Laura. So Nick, are you referring to the food recovery proposal?
Yep.
So the food recovery proposal is in the same location as the precautionary principle proposal. So it's on the September 21st Organics Committee public notice. I believe they're already made accessible, so we could potentially post them as part of this meeting's public notice as well, if that's desired.
Would it be possible to have one page that has all the working documents so we don't have to go back to each agenda item?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, because if people have to dive into each committee to see, or they could all be linked back to the homepage so that anybody looking at the commission page can see all the documents we're working on, because they don't know where necessarily to look to go find them. We'll work with Cal Recycle. Richard and I have our call after this meeting, so we'll work with them on that and see if that's possible, because I agree, we're trying to make this easy for the public to follow us, and a lot of challenges to that. So, okay, we are now at, is that it for that item then? Okay. We'll go ahead. Canceled, it looks like. I thought. Yeah. Okay, so we're at 10 minutes to 10. We have Secretary Blumenfeld coming in 10 minutes. I would suggest we take a quick 8-minute break and come back just a couple minutes before 10, and then we will not take a break this afternoon. So grab your bites to eat and all that, and we'll see you 2 minutes to 10 and be ready for Secretary Blumenfeld. Thank you so much. See you in a few minutes. And you might want to make sure your mic is off and your camera is off. Okay, let's bring everybody back. Great, thank you. I think, okay, so do we have Secretary Blumenfeld? See almost everybody back. Just want to highlight, while we were on break, I checked my email, and I guess the governor is going to announce new actions on the fight against climate change at noon today. And we're hearing it's got something to do with soils. So we will find out this afternoon, and it might be related to the Organics Committee. So you might all want to track that. It'll be announced in Yolo County. Okay, so CalRecycle, do we have Secretary Blumenfeld joining us? Hello? There you are.
Yes, he will be joining. He should be on any minute.
Okay, well, I think what we had asked him to speak on was, you know, his vision for what would be the most useful thing we could do as a commission. And then, of course, you know, give us an update on what's happening with CalRecycle appointments and others. And I see he's joining us. See, Secretary Blumenfeld, are you on the phone? Are you going to do video? Zoe, I can't hear him. I saw it looks like he was coming in to this.
I'm here. I'm trying to use, I'm not familiar with GoToMeeting, so I had to download it. But okay, share my webcam. I think we're
there. You
ready.
are.
Wow.
Good morning. We're so glad you could join us today. Thanks for making the time.
Of course. How are you all doing?
We're great. We're staying really busy. This is a very busy commission, and the committees are reporting out all their hard work on what's recyclable and compostable, and now we just want to make sure that you're happy with our product, and maybe you can give us some updates on, you know, your vision of what we would deliver that would be the most useful to Cal EPA. And we just want to open the lines of communication. So the commissioners asked that we invite you and start that open conversation about what we're doing, and also what's happening with CalRecycle appointments and some other things they might have questions on. I'll just let you have the floor, and we'll take
Excellent.
questions.
Well, first of all, great to see so many of you, old friends. And for those who haven't met, we spoke at the first meeting that you had. Congratulations, Heidi, on being anointed the chair. And to everyone else, really appreciate you spending the time on the commission. It sounds like Zoe was telling me just the phenomenal number of times that you've met, the amount of public testimony that you've already received is actually quite, I was like, could this really have happened? I mean, it says that you've met 23 times and 71 hours of public meetings on record. It felt like a week ago that I was talking to you at the inaugural meeting. So thank you for that. I mean, to kind of frame off what Heidi was describing, one, I want to reserve most of the time just to an open discussion. I thought I could kick it off with just some opening remarks, but really want to leave the bulk of the time so that we can talk, because we don't often have that opportunity to do that. So as you know, I mean, you're all experts in this field. We have kind of a number of things colliding when it comes to both California, national and international, both systems and markets, and stresses on those systems. And, you know, just the change in consumer habits since COVID, issues like, you know, PPE getting caught up in the processing, you know, the amount that people are ordering from home, the amount of single-use materials that are coming in, all kind of came together with the issues that we already had around a diminishing amount of convenience under the bottle bill, especially for rural communities, a lot of consolidation within the industry, understanding of kind of what isn't happening through the legislature in terms of moving towards a circular economy. So, you know, this is an area that you all know has a huge amount of public interest in it. People care deeply about materials. They care deeply about litter, plastics in the ocean, but they also want to know that they can have the things that they need in order to live the lives that they desire. And so how we bring all these things together and understand, for instance, you know, the governor signed a really important piece of executive order as well as legislation on minimum recycled content. So, you know, within the same week, I think we had the zero emission vehicle requirement for 2035, and we had the Ting bill on minimum recycled content. Both happened very similar period of time. And I don't think in most people's mind, they understand that at a global level, there's a search to move from transportation fuels being fossil fuel based to really, there's been a lot in the media around this. Recently, an article about Kenya and other countries in Africa, the push towards moving transportation fuels towards plastics. So we have these very big kind of meta level trends that are happening. And here in California, I think our challenge and the challenge to the commission and all of you is, how do we rationalize old systems that were state of the art in the 80s? And that includes everything from the legislation itself to how we're thinking about incentive payments to different parts of the process, all the way through kind of the role that manufacturers need to play, must play, versus the role of consumers and local government and state government. So all these, you know, the reason that when people ask me, well, what the hell does a circular economy mean? I start by kind of backing up and saying what we currently have is a very linear system. So if you start with that assumption, which I think accurately frames where we are, it's very, very linear. You know, you have the extractive practice, you have the design, the manufacturing, the consumption, and the end of life, and kind of understanding how we move towards a circular economy. For many people who aren't you and us thinking about this every day, they kind of get lost on what that means. But we're currently in a place where we really need to understand how to move away from those systems. At the same time, we have short-lived climate pollutants 1383, which is an incredibly important but difficult piece of legislation to effectively implement, especially in the times that we find ourselves, namely a $54.3 billion budget deficit. And so what will it take? How are we going to bring in the private sector? I think that's one very key element, that whether or not we found ourselves in the economic crisis that we're in, we need to partner in a much more collaborative and expansive way. And for me, the beauty of systems of stewardship and extended or advanced producer responsibility really have at their core that unless we put the responsibility back on manufacturers to own part of the end of life, they're not going to reduce the burden on society and on us in the same way. So these models of, since the 80s, I think everyone else around the country and including California on single particular items, and Heidi and many of you on the commission have been very involved in everything from mattresses to paint to sharps to batteries to used oil. We have started down that road, but really we have to do it comprehensively. So the final point that I'd really think about is the jobs. For me, people are not understanding the massive opportunity that we have in bringing back remanufacturing and manufacturing jobs to California that were sent overseas as we sent our materials overseas. And for me, the national sword policies that started in China and moved throughout the markets that we used to send material to is a huge opportunity. It's not a crisis at all. It's an opportunity to get accountability. It's an opportunity to get a real grip on where our materials are going, be able to account for them, and then most importantly, create hundreds of thousands, hopefully, of good paying jobs in this economy. So I would think if I was on the commission, or if I'm asking you what I need is really a roadmap for this point in time, not something that deals with your particular problem that you represent. You're all there representing an interest, and there's a great diversity of opinion and expertise and background on the commission. But what I need, and I think the governor and the legislature and others need, is kind of, if we go, there's a shining path that we can play in helping create jobs, helping move the economy forward, helping reduce the burden on local government, and do that in such a way that we can catalyze a movement across the nation. Because of California's economic clout as the world's 5th largest economy, what we do, frankly, is a little bit different than what Oregon and Washington does. They can do an amazing job, and I actually think they're ahead of us on many aspects, and I know some of you are going on a site visit to look at what they're doing. But California really, the reason that so much money has been spent to defeat some of the initiatives and legislative efforts in California is what we do will change the national dialogue on this issue. So a lot is at stake, and a lot of current jobs are at stake in our state. So when you bring together climate, local economy, jobs, remanufacturing, and the potential to change the whole system, I think looking and bringing those threads together, we often look at them in like silos. The opportunity look at circular economy for me is about explaining really in very clear terms what we can do, how we can get there, and kind of helping prioritize what needs to be done first, so that to the extent we can't do it all at the same time, we understand from a stacking perspective what needs to happen first. But I'm super excited by this opportunity. I also would love to get folks, understanding kind of what they think of the year ahead, given that 2022 we're going to have a ballot initiative that that many of you have worked on or familiar with. Like, what is the opportunity in the year ahead, and how do we take best advantage of that? So with that, I'll open it up to questions and dialogue, and look forward to talking to you all.
Much for being with us today, Secretary Blumenfeld. And there's a lot of comments from the commissioners, so I'll just read them off in order. Commissioner Dell, did you have a comment or a question for the Secretary?
Yes, I do. Great to meet you, Secretary Blumenfeld. My name's Jan Dell. I'm the founder of the Last Beach Cleanup. My question for you is on the environmental injustice that California is causing in poor communities in foreign countries. Now, you mentioned our plastic waste exports in the past tense. But unfortunately, that's not the case. California is actually the laggard. In the month of August 2020 alone, California exported 11.5 million kilograms of plastic waste to countries with poor waste management. That's 72 shipping containers per day of our waste going to poor countries. For the little country of Malaysia alone, we flooded them with 3.4 million kilograms in the month of August alone. That's 22 shipping containers. We only have 13% of the population in the country, but we account for 33% of plastic waste exports to poor countries. And these are the very countries that are being blamed for plastic pollution to the ocean. More than 100 investigations and reports have proven this serious economic, social, and environmental harm caused by our waste in poor countries. PBS Frontline showed American plastic waste open burned in Indonesia. So what I'd like to know is, does your administration support ending plastic waste exports to poor countries and ending the economic, social, environmental, and economic harms that our waste is causing? Thank you.
So Jan, I feel your pain, and I think everyone on this call, but I can speak for me, it feels a heartfelt kind of pain when we think about those exports. For me, the concept of a circular economy and the promise means that everything sold in California should ultimately be able to be reused or recycled in California. So that's where I want to go. Does that mean that's where we are? No. So I think we need, I've gone to many of the countries that we send waste to, and we were in this delusional state, Jan, that that I think we're coming out of, that state law encouraged, that basically said anything that was sent abroad counted as being recycled. And clearly it wasn't being. And the burdens, the first wave of kind of shock, I think, was around electronic waste, how our electronic waste was being disposed of and having incredibly negative health impacts. My goal is to work with all of you to understand what systems we need to put in place and goals to make sure that where we are sending anything, any export, that we understand the chain of custody, we understand how it's being dealt with, we understand, the standards that we would have here are being met elsewhere. We can't just export our problem and have it dealt with in ways that contaminate local communities. So that has to be our goal, because we can't simply have a consumer-based economy here where we export our negative externalities to places that can't handle them. So I'm completely with you in spirit. I think the challenge that we all face and that this commission faces is how do we get the building blocks in place to achieve the, at the moment, aspirational goal of being able to manage all our waste streams within the state or within a few states. How do we do that? And until we do that, I think we can say that we care about this stuff, and we will care about it, but we won't be effectuating the change that we need in a big enough way. So it's not a complete answer, but it's certainly a motivator for me to think about how we change the system we have. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, and I would say to Commissioner Dell that this could be added to our future agenda items as far as addressing exports. Other, the EU and others ban, I think we were going to discuss that, and we've been looking for a speaker on that. But that is something that the Commission could suggest the legislature about exports and what we can and cannot do. So we should think about that, and if that's something to take up and the Commission wants to do that. Thank you. And then John Davis, I think you have a comment or a question.
Well, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for queuing up my comment, because you may recall speaking at Rexpo, the Greater Stockton Chamber of Commerce event earlier, and made similar observations. There's a number of us have worked with that group statewide, trying to promote in-state use of the materials so that export becomes unnecessary, that we have a strong demand in California for materials. And we've been working actually with some of your staff to explore something called the consolidated permit process, which has been on the books in California for decades, and would authorize you and your department to undertake some action, coordinated action. So I think you're going to see some recommendations soon around that, and we're actually going to be discussing it at an event called the BIN Summit, the Build Infrastructure Now Coalition event, that's also organized by Greater Stockton Chamber on October 28th, and we're going to be looking at some very specific applications, 2 projects, paper pulping, that are coming from greenfield developments, brand new projects, one in Virginia, one in Utah, and the question is, how do we collectively make that happen in California? So, thank you for what you just articulated once again, because I think it's in line with what we hope to be able to present soon, and we appreciate the support that you and your staff has given us.
Just to build on that, John, I mean, one of the things that would be great to get your input on, and actually the governor's coming out with an announcement today about soil health, and one of the issues there that CalRecycle continues to try and facilitate between the air and water boards is on-farm composting, which we're not going to go down that track now, but the point is that we need to, I call it cutting green tape. Like, what are the bureaucratic obstacles to doing things that we want to do? And we built some in that make very little sense. So how are we thinking differently about some of these processes? And I think that should be a whole chapter of stuff that you focus on. Like, here are things that we want to do in California that we don't want to reduce in the environmental issues around them. We want to make sure we have safeguards. At the same time, the process by which you get a secondary MRF built or a compost facility done, like, it's taking so much time and so much money that our goals are not aligned with our processes. So, John, I know you were talking broader, but that would be a helpful thing, Heidi and team, to think about.
Will do.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Dunleavy, you were next.
Yes, good morning, Secretary Blumenfeld. I'm Jeff Dunleavy with Mings Recycling here in Sacramento. Recently, we've had CalRecycle staff and one of your staff out to our facility to take a look at material quality coming through the buyback centers and coming through the curbside programs. And to kind of chime in on what Commissioner Dell was saying, we are running into a crisis with the inability to move material coming from curbside programs because of the contamination. The recycling committee is trying to get a simpler.
Jeff, I'm sorry, we're getting a little feedback. So if you're not mute yourself until, thank you.
So I'm not sure where the feedback is coming from. So is that better? Okay. So we're focused on simpler recycling programs for the curbside operations, but we're also starting to look at the bottle bill. And the bottle bill needs a lot of issues to get fixed. And just want to get your thoughts on the bottle bill. Is it something that can't get fixed? If so, what are some of the priorities that you would be looking at to fix within the bottle bill? But you also mentioned producer responsibility, the Oregon program, things like that. Just any guidance on what our committee could be looking at as possible fixes for the bottle bill?
So the thing that I would take away, starting with the positive, Jeff, is I think deposit systems are very, they incent behavior. We have a very, the bottle bill, despite all its mechanical problems, has performed incredibly well over the years. So as a system, I think there's a lot of good. However, everything from how convenience is described to the role of take back and where it is and isn't within the state, and how the payments to processors and haulers and each of the different component parts, I think are very, very difficult to change, because there's a lot of history and interest in not reducing a payment if you're getting one, not tinkering with or expanding things that hurt one particular element of this very, it's very interconnected and overly complex. So attempts, as you know, Jeff, over the years to fix a part of it have not proved very successful. So that's the bottle bill. Whatever happens, I think we're going to need some changes to help us get through the current state that we're in, and your recommendations on what those priorities are. And I would describe them as kind of things that keep the system running as distinct from a massive overall change. For me, the massive overall change needs to be to move towards a more a system where deposit could be part of it, but where we're more collaborating with industry to develop a system of shared responsibilities. And so that's what when I think about a circular economy, the role of producer responsibility is key. The role of stewardship is key. And for me, the role of CalRecycle would be more overseer of what is the stewardship plan? What are the goals that need to be in that plan? How do we make sure that those actions are getting there while protecting the haulers and local government who are doing a great job of managing a lot of the mechanics right now. So, that a lot of those elements were in 1080-54. That obviously didn't make it over the finish line, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. What are the really key elements of those things that we need to just keep pushing forward on? It's no surprise to you that one of the things that I also really care about is funding. In order to get from where we are to where we need to go, we need a source of revenue. And so, the ideas that are contained, if you kind of melded together 1080-54 and the ballot initiative, you've got a lot of where we need to go. So my question is kind of, is there an opportunity to go there with the legislature in the year ahead? And that's a conversation I think we need to have. When it comes to the bottle bill, we need to keep it healthy enough to keep going until we have either a wholesale reform of it so that it can work in a more equitable and functioning way, or replace it with something that's different. And so how we think about that would be great to get your ideas and feedback on. It's not an easy thing to do. I do believe it's something that at some point soon we will need to have to do.
Thank you, Secretary Blumenfeld. And we are, do you have a hard stop at 10:30?
I can take one more question. Yeah, I have to, we're doing a fun event with the governor in Winters, but it's not too far away, so I can take one. I love this stuff. I could be here all day. I wish I was on the committee and one of you was the secretary, maybe Richard.
Yeah, exactly. So Commissioner
Really
Valle, he's our vice chair. So go right ahead.
Thank you. Secretary Blumenfeld, thank you so much for being here today. I'll try to be brief. We are going to need an advocate. We're going to need a champion to carry our recommendations forward. I hope that you will be that person, because currently, without somebody at the helm at Cal Recycle, it makes it very difficult for the commission to carry this water alone. And I think it's not fair to the staff at Cal Recycle to ask them to bring our recommendations forward. So hopefully 2 things can happen. One, before we come in mid 2021, there'll be somebody at Cal Recycle that can lead our group. And then hopefully when we do come forward with some recommendations on fixing things like the bottle bill, organics, and other areas, you'll be there for us as well, and we can all be on the same page. And I think that's really the key to achieving success in this commission. So thank you very much. So the question to you is, how soon do you think we can get somebody to lead Cal Recycle?
That's a great question, Richard. So I'm certainly committed to getting someone as soon as we can. It has proved, it's challenging, just to put it out there. We've been working with the governor's office. The governor, Richard, and team, just to let you know, is really fluent in these issues and very sensitive to them in a way that I don't think any governor has been before. I had the privilege of working with the governor when he was mayor for 9 years, and we did a lot on recycling. He spent a lot of time understanding the system. So I definitely will be an advocate with you, and kind of work through and have a conversation about kind of what are the things we want to prioritize going forward, and then thinking about how we tee those up for the governor and the legislature. I'll get back to the Cal Recycle position in a second, but in addition to the governor, I think leadership in the assembly and the pro tem is incredibly important. My observation from the last year is that we always back into this. We have the great ideas, we work through the coalitions, and then at the end of the day, we try and get leadership on board, and often it's too late by that time. So I think the more we can do to educate and get ownership and buy-in soon from leadership in the Assembly and Senate is incredibly important. We often focus on the governor. For my take, if it's kind of bold and makes sense and there's a coalition behind it, we're gonna have a fairly good time and fun time talking to the governor about it. But this issue, and all of you who have spent time last year in the legislature can probably also attest, it is an uphill battle. It feels like a really uphill battle, even just to describe the relevancy, like why are we talking about this? It feels like every conversation I have feels like there's 1,000 reasons why people are focused on something else. So how we think about giving this the legs that it needs to go forward, I think is the most critical thing that we do. And I'm certainly, to answer your second question, Richard, more than happy. Like, I really want to prioritize this. So use me and think about how we can do that. The position, going back to the governor, every governor's appointee to anything the governor signs off on. And this particular position, he's very focused on making sure that we fill. At the same time, he has a certain sense of what he wants around kind of innovation and pushing. And so, yeah, my goal is to have it filled not only for this. As you know, Cal Recycle has kind of a hidden secret which is that it does the debris removal after the fires, and with more than 7,000 structures from this, I mean, we're not even at the end of fire season. I really worry about the amount of time and attention that takes away from the core mission. So leadership is really critical because Ken and Zoe and team are spending an appropriate, because it's an incredibly pressing emergency issue on debris cleanup. But we need everything to be functioning in order to get this done. So any help that, I want to give them the help that they need in a leader who can help move this forward. So in summary, it's a priority for me, and we will keep you posted.
Great. Well, I think you've got to get going to your other event. And I guess if I had to summarize what I just heard you say to make sure we've all got the same understanding, is that it's important for us to partner with the private sector to find shared responsibilities. We've got to focus on the jobs and bringing the remanufacturing and recycling back home, providing a roadmap for how we get through this time, and bringing out the funding and managing our own stuff, and that you have agreed and are excited about being our champion. And that part of what we need to do for you is to help educate the legislature and the leadership so that we can all move forward together. And I know that I'm sure every commissioner on this commission would be happy to go over to the legislature and start doing early briefings, and we can talk as a commission later about that, or even having the Commissioner Valle and I go over with your authority and approval to discuss certain things and start seeing where, you know, our recommendations are coming and the importance of our industry, because as Secretary Blumenfeld said, I've experienced the same thing. It's almost like we're, and I'm saying this as a quasi-redheaded stepchildren in this industry, and they don't understand the importance of what we do to climate change and litter and ocean pollution and all these different things. And we've got to bring that home and make sure they understand that we're key to this entire circular economy, and we have a lot to give, and a lot of good ideas coming from this commission that I hope they'll be ready to accept and take into the legislation session next year. So yeah, I think with that, oh, go ahead.
The only final thing I'd say is like that coalition building, so that you've got, you know, the League of Cities and you've got the counties coming in, and you've got, because the issue with recycling that we need to understand we're countering, and certainly I'd want to make sure that anything that we did legislatively, we coordinate with Mindy McIntyre, who's fantastic on CalRecycle. So at some point it'd be worth, if you haven't already, having her come and talk with all of you. She's really great.
Half an hour ago.
Oh, great. So Mindy's awesome. So the thing that I felt, and others can chime in and then I'll jump off, but the thing that I felt is that we're countering 10 years of bickering around recycling. So it's kind of like the legislators who've been there a long time, all they remember is just everyone wanting their piece of the pie and no one ever agreeing on anything. And so we need to surprise them by the unanimity with which we come in. And we're never going to get everyone, but the more we can, the more we can get folks aligned early, the better. And so really thinking about what are those things that you can bring to the table, where there's, whether it's, you know, the 5 big principles that you maybe share early, like these are principles we're going to build on. Does everyone agree on these principles? And everyone's like, yes, these are the principles we agree on. And then the next thing is like, this is how we're articulating the next step from those principles. And so building a journey or a discussion where people can all get on board, I think is important. But I really appreciate each and every one of you taking the time. And next time we have a call, you can all call me Jared. I was like, who's the secretary? Oh, that was me. I'm not used to anyone calling me that. So I really like you guys, because you're the first people who've ever said that. So that's what kind of commission you are. You do it by the book. But next time you can just call me Jared. And I'm happy to do this more often, Heidi. And yeah, finally just thank you. I know this isn't easy, and I know many of you have been doing it for years, some of you decades, to try and think about how to move this agenda forward. So really appreciate it and look forward to continuing the discussion soon. And now I have GoToMeeting downloaded. I can be even more fluent. I actually have no idea how to exit this, but I'll work it out while you move on to the next issue, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Jared, for coming. I know we all appreciate it tremendously, and we'll be in very close touch, and we'll have you back as soon as your schedule allows. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Well, that was wonderful. I'm so glad we were able to have him on the meeting today. Sorry that commissioners, we had more comments and questions for him than we had time. But as he said, he's welcome to come back. So I'll be working with Zoe and Commissioner Valle, and we'll see how fast we can get him back, and also talk amongst ourselves about some of the information he shared with us. Okay, so with that, and we can talk at the end about next agenda items. On agenda item 10, we can discuss what we just heard and how we incorporate that into our work as well. So I think at this point, we've got really important report outs from our different committees. I think the next committee we'll take up is labeling and public education, which will come before then recycling, because they're very tied together and they've asked to go in that order, and then market development last. So we'll go ahead and turn this over to the chair of the labeling committee.
Chair Sanborn, sorry, Jill, this is Kate. There was a public comment that came in for agenda item 4. It has been published. Would you like me to read that, or we have published that comment?
Well, if it's published during the meeting, sometimes I can't read all that while we're going. So why don't you just go ahead and read it, because it should be short, correct?
Okay, yes. This is from Tim Shestak at American Chemistry Council. And again, this was for agenda item 4. There was some discussion at the October 7th meeting about greenhouse gas impacts. Does the commission plan to examine how its policy recommendations may impact overall GHG emissions in the state? Is it possible that policy recommendations could result in a shift in packaging materials that may have a greater impact on GHG emissions across its overall life cycle? How will the commission factor in this type of information into its overall policy recommendations? And that is the comment. And again, it has been published.
Great. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for reading that off. I think that probably won't answer that right now, because it's just part of the work we're doing actually right now, is figuring this all out. So we appreciate the comment. Okay, great. Well, let's go on, and we'll turn over to Commissioner Dell.
Okay, so we are ready to make a draft policy recommendation for consideration by the committee. I sent this PowerPoint to Heidi. Heidi, do you have it? If not, I have the PowerPoint I can pull up on my screen.
I should go ahead and do that. That's
okay, so I need to be given controls, and Kobe will be doing this. So this is always fun. Let's see, calorie cycle. Okay, that's great. I'm going to hit share. Is there a presentation being seen?
Yep.
Okay.
You can see it.
And I am going to go and put it in full screen mode, and I'm talking slowly to stall in case you couldn't tell. I'm going to put this.
Yeah, just go ahead. Commissioner Valle, I see at 10:40 you had put in a comment. Did you want to say anything before we get started on this?
I'll wait until we do agenda items. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm going to put this into presentation mode, and I can't see anyone. So Kobe will be presenting this. And so Kobe, please tell me when to advance the slides. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm really excited about presenting this. The Labeling and Media Committee invited me to be a liaison between that committee and the Organics Committee, and I actually work with Commissioner Dell to refine this presentation, which is something really she had drafted and put together. But I'm very excited to share it with you, and the two of us will answer questions. So go ahead and move to the next slide. I think all of you understand the importance of having good labeling on our products, and this is something actually Commissioner Adele, these photos are ones that she's taken from her neighborhood that show you the problems with inconsistencies and confusion about what goes into which bin. And our goal is to create a system that is much simpler and helps to address some of these common issues where we have the wrong items being placed in the bins. These are things that I think can move very quickly. And once we have clear labels, we can connect them to the list of recyclable and compostable products that the other committees are working on. Let's go to the next slide. There's a variety of causes and confusion for the contamination. And for one thing, there are very different lists throughout all the different jurisdictions in California. And these are a couple of examples that you're seeing on the screen here. What is accepted or not accepted. Sometimes it's very short lists, sometimes it's very detailed lists. There are things accepted in some systems and not others. And probably more importantly, there isn't always a direct connection between what's listed on outreach materials for a particular jurisdiction and what is actually recovered for recycling at the facility that the material ends up going to. And that's something that I think the Commission has done a really good job in helping to narrow down that list. Go to the next slide. This is another specific example. Just in one county, Solano County, we had 6 different lists that are completely different from one another. And you can imagine people that might move within Solano County having a lot of confusion about what should I actually recycle. So this is something that if we had a simplified system, we could really address in a more holistic way. Next slide. To kind of visually explain how we're narrowing this, of course, when you start at the top with 13 million households in 58 counties, 482 municipalities, it feels like it's a daunting challenge. But as we filter down into where this material really goes, which is it's fed into only 76 material recovery facilities statewide who sell it to about 50 brokers or buyers. It's much simpler to look at the buyers and the facilities and move from there to what really is recyclable. And so that's the approach that the Labeling and Media Committee took. Next slide. This is just a short slide to talk, and I'll say Jared mentioned this in his talk, that California is different from other states. So what might work in other states may not necessarily work here. There's a lot of things that make California's markets unique, and I'll just mention a couple of examples for paper and OCC. About 85% of California's paper and OCC was exported, and there are strict markets for how, what's acceptable to those markets. And those markets may not be the same as markets on the East Coast, for example. And plastics, our definition of recycling is very specific about what is actually considered recycling. So the end destinations and the contamination standards mean that we should have a California-specific definition for recyclable. Next slide. The goal for the committee in developing this system is to make it as simple as possible. Simple just makes it a lot easier for people at a glance to be able to determine if something is recyclable or not. And if that is connected to their purchasing decisions, how they manage that material when they're done using it, and what bin it goes into. If there's consistency in that messaging and the jurisdictions and the state are all reinforcing that simpler message, it's much more likely to be successful. Next slide. So this is a summary of our approach. And fundamentally, it uses an icon and color to differentiate between the different categories of materials. So a simple recycling icon, we recommend connected with the color blue, which is now the standard for recycling bins, and we're moving towards all bins having that color at a minimum on the lid, if not for the entire container. We have a green icon that's connected with compostable materials, and then we also recommend an icon for things that should be placed in the trash, and that will further clarify which bin things should be going into. There may need to be some exceptions to this, or potentially a fourth category, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So for example, dual stream might have another bin. There might be nuances to the way this is locally advertised, so that there might be anything with this symbol in addition to some additional products that are recyclable locally that would be advertised in certain jurisdictions. We can also add stickers to the lids so that we wouldn't have to necessarily replace that. A lot of jurisdictions already do that, have stickers on the lids to make it easy for people to know what is recyclable. And then there would be a requirement for labels to be placed on all of the commonly disposed consumer products. So it would be easy at a glance to identify, look for that symbol, and make it separate from what we know right now is that plastic identification symbol. And we can talk a little bit more about that in future slides as well. Next slide. These are some of the proposed options that we had for what the logos would look like. So there was a lot of support for kind of reclaiming the chasing arrows symbol. I think that if we were to pursue this, we would really need to address the fact that the symbol is now very commonly found on all plastics with a number to indicate which type of plastic resin it is. And I think that is a big source of confusion. So our recommendation would be to prohibit plastics from using a chasing arrows symbol unless they are recyclable, and use a different code, maybe a circle with a number, to identify what type of resin the plastic is so that there's no confusion. For the compost, my team actually developed a mock-up of a leaf that's in the shape of a C. So these are just some options for consideration, and then a couple of different options for an icon that designates this is something that should be placed in the bin that goes to landfills at your particular jurisdiction. We're definitely open to suggestions on all of these icons. My thought was not to use any letters like R or O, because that depends on the particular language that's being used, and we know that we really want this to be visually simplified and easy to recognize regardless of the primary language in the particular household. Next slide. So this ties into some of the work in the recycling committee about what is recyclable. So they have identified particular product types, and this would be the ones that are connected to that particular logo that is designated recyclable in the state. And we're, of course, going to talk a lot more in detail about which products make it to this list or not, but this is basically the highest bar. If you meet this bar, you get to use that very special recycling logo. Next slide. The second category might be products that are not labeled, and this would be, for example, items that are local add. So maybe cartons would be in this category, or aluminum foil, things that some recyclers are able to recover, but that don't meet that high threshold that it's recoverable in 75% of the jurisdictions and meet all 7 of the criteria for being considered recyclable statewide. So we have the highest bar, which is recyclable. There's an interim threshold that we're recommending, which would be not labeled, that is only a specific list of products. And then if you go to the next slide, we have 2 additional categories, which are items labeled for disposal. And we wanted to discuss with the commission whether it makes sense to also have a label for HHW materials. So things that we do not want in any of your curbside bins and should be properly disposed at, I think most jurisdictions have opportunities for taking those materials to in a household hazardous waste program. Next slide. Just a very high-level summary of the benefits to a very simple system that is clearly connected to a visual logo and a particular color. It would reduce contamination that could be costly and in some cases dangerous in MRF systems. And we've seen that, for example, with batteries creating fires, with sharps creating needle sticks. So this kind of simple labeling can help people to really make sure they put the right bins in the right materials in the right bins. It would help improve the value of the bales that are recovered, reduces consumer confusion. It would help rebuild some of the credibility for recycling, where a lot of folks feel like, oh, why do I bother recycling anything if so much of it ends up in landfill? So this will help us to get much cleaner material that will be much more likely to actually be recovered. And it reduces costs to our taxpayers and ratepayers and promotes more private investment. I think we're almost to the last slide. There we go. So we've got our recycling mascot. I'm hoping that there's comments, questions, feedback on this recommendation.
I'm sure there are from the public and from the commissioners. First, I know we've already got one comment from Commissioner Lapis. We'll let that go, and then we'll ask CalRecycle if there's any public comments. Commissioner Lapis?
Thank you guys for putting this together. I really like the work you've done, and I like how far it's come from the labeling committee meeting. I was just in the audience in that watching. I really like this concept of reclaiming the chasing arrows. And I think one of our core recommendations should be that you can only use the chasing arrows if you are recyclable statewide. And we should prohibit the use of the chasing arrows or the word recyclable on any product that isn't. You know, we do that a little bit with the word recyclable as is. You're not allowed to use the word recyclable on something that doesn't meet the FTC green guides. But that's a pretty low bar, and I think it's time to update that. But the same thing with the chasing arrows. I love the idea of a resin code being in something else. I know the SPI rules or the ASTM rules actually have it as a triangle now, not chasing arrows. A circle would be even better, but at the very least, I think requiring that they not use the chasing arrows would be, I think, one of our primary recommendations. On the compostability, I think it's a really cool logo. I think there's a little bit more to it. The state of Washington is just right now beginning to mandate a variety of very specific labeling requirements for compostables. So including, you know, like requiring green and brown bags, I believe, have to be compostable, and no non-compostable bag can use those colors. There also have a few other really specific recommendations about that as well. And I think that we can put a little bit more meat on the bones of the compostability, because it's really got to be discernible at a glance. And we've really got to deal with the lookalike products. And then I definitely think there's a question about, should we include something about, you know, don't put it in a bin? And I think we definitely should. You know, I think that would help with the lithium-ion problem we have, and with a lot of other materials that do not belong in any of the bins. And so a requirement to have a prominent label to not put something in any bin would be a good recommendation.
Any curbside?
Yep.
Thank you. And can I ask Cal Recycle, do you have any public comments? I don't hear any, so I'll move on to Commissioner Ward.
Thanks. I think this is great work, and I'd like to echo the comments that we reclaim the recycling symbol. I like the composting symbol. I think it's important to have a landfill symbol and also one for household hazardous waste programs. Immediately comes to mind is a skull and crossbones. I don't know if there's restrictions on that, but I also think that if something falls definitively into the trash only or household hazardous waste only program, that can't be the end of the discussion. If we're serious about our 75% goal, then there can't be very many things that fall into the trash only category. There can't be very many things that fall into the household hazardous waste program category, because that's 25% of the total waste stream, and everything else has to be everywhere else. So I think there needs to be something else past that. For labeling, this is great. For clarity, this is great. For improving our recycling systems, I think this is wonderful. I do think we will need a lot on those other.
If I could respond, this is Jan, to that comment. You know, Commissioner Ward, I've given that great thought because I spend a lot of time in stores, fast-moving consumer goods stores, looking at the products and looking at the recyclability. And I say to myself, there's no way to make a 50% goal. There's no way to make the 75% goal based on the packaging in these stores or even the single-use durable items. But that doesn't mean we should label something as not trash only. This is the time, per your words, of the Great Reset. And we may have a statewide goal of 50% or 75%, but if only 20% of things actually warrant the recyclable or compostable or on the potential list, then we have to be truthful about that. And it may be that a big long list actually is trash only or hazardous waste. Would you agree with that?
I do. I think in general, I still agree that, you know, we're trying to demuddy the waters, which means that the folks who are being separated out and called out as being not compostable, not recyclable are going to be, no question about that. But we're in the role of playing ref, so we have to make those calls. And I think if we're making the calls that most of this is currently designed as trash, we need to call it as such. But like I said, that means our work isn't done. The communications with respect to those companies that are receiving the trash only labels, the household hazardous waste only labels, then that is the start of an additional conversation about looking at either product redesign or how do they address their responsibilities with respect to our 75%?
Absolutely agree. This is where we get back to the baseline of what is actually accurate. And then we can make the strategic approach about how to put funding in or what the requirements are or what's the biggest bang for the buck, what's the biggest item that would be best to try to change and what have you. But until we get to an accurate understanding, really factually based, then we're just waving our hands. So thank you for this interaction, because this has definitely come to me when I've been standing in stores and looking around.
Commissioner Sanborn, this is CalRecycle. We have two public comments hot off the press, if you would like
them. Okay, hold on for just a second, because I did want to address something that Commissioner Ward said. The HHW is not actually included in the diversion rate, but I think that's been part of the issue, is it's kind of been put off, and there's been confusion between DTSC and CalRecycle as to who is responsible for what on household hazardous waste, which is a whole nother issue I would like to talk about at the end when we talk about the agenda, next agendas, because I think the cost and the amount of money we're spending on that little tiny waste stream is outrageous. And if we can get that down, maybe that money can be redirected to other bigger volume items and get rid of some contamination that is toxic to our organics and even more dangerous for our recycling system. So I just want to make sure people are clear that we don't include household hazardous waste in our diversion numbers.
Well, and it is a common area of confusion, just to follow on, because I take household electronics, individual vaping devices. There's all these things that have a combination of electronics and batteries and their personal use devices, and we're seeing more and more of them. And they don't fit very well into this labeling scheme. And that's not because they're not going to be part of our economy. We just need to address the dynamic nature of the economy and make sure that when we're clarifying these roles, everything has a place that's covered, and we're trying to make it as clear as we can.
We'll go to public comments first, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Schneider.
Great. So we have two public comments. The first one is from Peter Muli, and it says, relabel Media and Education Committee Subcommission presentation from an e-waste and durable goods perspective, and in the spirit of leading with source reduction, of maintaining, servicing, and repairing durable goods and providing the information to keep durable goods at their highest utility for as long as possible. Would it be too much of a stretch for the Label Media and Education Committee Subcommission or the overall commission to address manufacturers' documentation, e.g. service manuals, diagnostic tools, and information to obtain reasonably priced service and repair parts as part of the recommendations? Fix-It Clinic, cultivating resilient communities through all ages. Do it together.
Okay, let me respond to that real quickly. I know Peter, the National Stewardship Action Council Policy Committee and Chair just submitted a letter yesterday about bringing up this issue of repairability and the right to repair. And I was planning on bringing that up under next agenda items. So thank you for that comment. The next comment, please.
Next comment is from Tanya Randall, and it says, how does this labeling program deal with national brands that also use the How to Recycle label on their products? And if not labeled, but is a local ad, how is that different from the Check Locally label that SPC currently provides for products with less than 60% access?
I can address that. California, with 40 million people and our unique requirements for both paper and plastic products, requires its own labeling system. My group and others have done extensive surveys and assessment of the How to Recycle labels, and they're simply not accurate for California, which would leave us with basically everything labeled as Check Locally, which has caused the contamination problem that we have here. So the point of this labeling system that we're proposing is for producers to put labels on products sold in California that directly simplify the system so Californians understand what is recyclable, what is compostable in California. On the composting issue, our composting is different. We have volatile organic carbon emission requirements that are going to make composting different as well. And to have a nationwide basis that doesn't look at our requirements, we would basically have every product labeled Check Locally, which does no good.
I would respond to Tanya that, California may be leading in this, and we look for the manufacturers who've already developed some sort of labeling protocol. If it's not aligning with this, to please submit comments to the labeling committee on your suggestions. But so far, I'm hearing a lot of agreement with the concept from the different commissioners, although we're just at the early part of the first discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Schneider.
Hi, thank you. Can we go to the slide that had the new symbols? And this has come far from our last labeling meeting. Thank you. I like the composting ones. Where I have my question is under trash versus landfill. On the labeling subcommittee or labeling committee, we talked about this. Most of the community where I am from San Francisco around the Bay Area already labels landfill as landfill, not trash. And I'm a little concerned that there seems to be a heavy emphasis on trash. I'm not a fan of using the word trash to begin with, but landfill. So I think, can we have a consensus or discussion amongst us of, are we going to use landfill or are we going to use trash? Otherwise, we're creating confusion. I would be happy to come back and look at HHW labeling and repairability labeling. My other concern is the Check Locally. So I think Commissioner Sky said 75% of jurisdictions. It's 75% of population, isn't it? the criteria 75% of population or jurisdiction, because it's completely different.
I think it's jurisdictions with 75% of the population.
Okay. Again, it comes back to those communities that have dual stream and might have more readily, have better markets for materials that won't fit within that 75 container, which means it's putting us into the check locally area. And I think we need to discuss a little deeper into what does that really mean for communities like my community and other dual stream communities.
Commissioner, what would be your recommendation to address that? I'm just curious.
Was that a question for me, Mr.
Yes.
Sky? You know, I don't know, because in our labeling committee, we kind of dive through it really quick. It's like, here's 75%, here's where we're going, and oh, you guys, that'll be a separate marketing plan, or that'll be a separate something else. And we haven't really dived into that as a committee. So I'd love for us to dive into it so that everybody understands that for those communities that aren't doing a simpler list, how much more work that's going to be. And what happens when you're next to a community that's much bigger than you, San Francisco, versus the 3 small cities where we have a different program on that. And, you know, I think what we did talk at the labeling committee was, if Cal Recycle is coming up with standardized labeling that then all jurisdictions and service providers can use, then that's when we're going to deal with it. But I think before we vote for this, we need to deal with that component now. And now it's complicated by national markets or national product branding of check locally. I have to start wrapping my head around what that would really mean to my community.
If I may address that, you know, we've talked about this several times at the committee, and we've actually identified only 2 things that were different in the dual stream system in Commissioner Snyder's area, and we've asked to learn more about those. But those 2 things actually are included in the local ad list. And as shown on this slide, we've actually accounted for the fact that there are some dual streams, and there could be a 4th bin, which would have a 4th label. So there would be a customization for that. And the check locally would be gone. That's actually a huge problem that's causing contamination across the whole country. So the idea would be California products get California labels, and that's the requirement. And the confusing check locally national labels that have no accuracy in California would no longer exist.
I'd just like to add one thing to this discussion. I think Commissioner Schneider, you brought up several different points, and actually in the future, if you could ask one question at a time, I think for all of us, that would be a lot easier to follow, and we can respond one at a time so we don't miss anything. But the issue around trash only versus landfill only, we do not only use landfills for disposal in the state. We still have 2 combustion plants, so it wouldn't actually be accurate to say it's landfill only. Just a point of clarification.
The opposite then, to start having all jurisdictions and all commercial bins change landfill and put trash because we have 2 incinerators in California?
These are just very early discussions. I was just pointing out that there are more disposal options than just landfill, that's all. So, and again, I want to highlight to everybody, these are huge recommendations that are draft from the recycling committee. And this is our first bite at the apple of having a discussion about them. And I know that people feel very, very, you know, this is an important thing that we're talking about, but it's not the last time we're going to talk about it. We're going to have to go through probably a couple of cycles of bites at the apple, hearing from the public and other commissioners to get to a place where we're all comfortable that we can have a consensus around this. So I just want to give everybody comfort that this is not your last chance to get your thoughts in, because this is a very big decision, and I think we all know the weight of it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Potashner.
Hi, thanks. Thank you, Commissioner Dale and Sky, for this work. I want to first echo the need for a label on items like ion batteries. I think that is a huge risk to our infrastructure right now. I think something that's clear and easy for customers for our consumers to understand and see will be helpful. I do have a question around bin labels. So if you have jurisdictions that have made investments for the local ad list, could there be a pathway, or would it make sense to have a pathway instead of having to require to put on a whole new set of labels on your bins, to just make sure that the existing labels cover everything that is on the California Recycles list? And there will be more on that because they've made those investments, they've made those decisions, instead of having to go through a whole other round of labeling for their bins. There is a cost there on ratepayers beyond just production of stickers. Actually, the labor cost of stickering all those bins is usually our highest cost when we go through this kind of outreach.
Yeah, I think that's, of course, all these practical decisions at that level, of course, that's reasonable.
Comment is from Commissioner Segura.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, once again, echo other folks, excellent work by the subcommittee. What a great point to bring up in terms of HHW. As Commissioner Potashner mentions, it's a significant issue of having different type of batteries. And I think it goes beyond batteries and other household hazardous waste type of products that go into containers that create not only hazardous situations for our facilities that might turn on fire or that we're having significant issues for, also all our employees that are working in environments that have to deal with these materials. And so I think that was an excellent thing to bring up. I think it's excellent to have the simple and smart. I can't tell you how many board meetings, city meetings, where constituents are truly confused. They want to do the right thing. That's a great, a great point to make, is they want to do the right thing, but they also, what I hear a lot in those comments is they also want to know those materials are recycled. And so, a phrase like simple and smart goes a long way to getting to that for the constituents to understand what definitely needs to go in, and that there's trust in the system of what goes in does get recycled. Really like the compost symbol, and I think the comment on degradation, I think it's important in the subcommittee we're discussing that the timeline of degradation, when what truly breaks down and is usable for compost. So I thought that was very good. So nice work to the subcommittee.
I think you're next. Did we lose him? Commissioner Sky, can you hear us?
Oh, I didn't hear the name. I was going to respond to a few things. One is regarding labeling items that are disposable. It was certainly a daunting decision because we were concerned that a lot of items would have that label on them. But there's a couple of reasons we decided to move forward with that. One is that it does give the public an accurate understanding of what should happen to the products that they buy. And I think the benefit of it is that it will help people make better choices, particularly as we see more materials striving to be produced with materials that are truly recyclable in California. And so it'll help to drive consumer decision making. I do think that landfill is the right label to use for things that are destined for disposal, even though there are a couple of waste energy facilities in California that handle a very small fraction of the waste. And just going back to the idea of simple messaging, when people talk about landfill, is just something that's easily understandable, and it's where in California, again, it's far more than 75% of what goes to disposal goes to a landfill.
Toyota, were you next?
As far as the check locally issue, if that does come back up, I'll take this back to the labeling committee also. But the trouble with that is that it means nothing. And if we're going to have some kind of an indicator where this might be go into your recycle bin or which bin this goes in your particular area, then it has to mean something. It can't say something like check locally. It has to say something like check here. And we have to have something specific that people can actually go and look at. And as far as putting things with the label of a trash bin, I completely agree with Commissioner Sky. And it's not just from a perspective of people, what do I want to buy if I want to be conscious, but it's also kind of a push toward the manufacturers as well. If you're going to make something and package it so that it can't be recycled, it's going to say that on the package. And I think that's going to help also drive that part of the circular economy as well. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Medrano?
A question for the committee. At a certain point for the consumer, common consumer products, are you going to talk about label placement requirements? How big will the label be? How big will the symbol be within the product itself?
Yeah, I think that's a next step. There's some legislation on that already around nutrition labeling. That's actually one of the problems with voluntary labels that are out on the products today. The products today all have company-backed systems or company-chosen systems, and I've become quite the student on taking pictures of those. And honestly, you can't read some with magnifying glasses. And so that definitely needs to be taken into account, that we make it clear and simple for people to read. And my goal would be even people, if they don't have their eyeglasses on, that they could even read it, that the symbol would be so obvious on which bin it could go into. But point taken, that would be at the next stage or the next stage of some of the details.
Right. As a person who needs a lot of reading glasses now, I appreciate that comment, Jen. Commissioner Ferrante.
Yeah, thanks. I want to echo the comments that Commissioner Toyota made. I agree with all of it. I agree with labeling, putting the landfill label on things that have to be disposed, but particularly the check local for the local ad. She's absolutely right. I mean, that needs to be easy and convenient for people. Otherwise, they just won't do it. And they'll continue to throw it in the recycling bin if they think it should be there, or just throw it in the trash if they don't want to look it up. So, I think we should talk about maybe what that looks like. And maybe there's some, central location where all, collection company, all of the outreach material that goes to customers also goes to CalRecycle, for example, right? And then there's a page where you can plug in your address and your outreach material comes up. Because for people that live also in, multifamily dwelling, apartments or condos, they don't necessarily have access to that material. They don't receive the outreach material that the, collection hauling company sends out to their customers. So if it's not easy for people to know and to find out, like very easy, whether they can recycle it, that she's right that label won't mean anything.
Yep, I think we've all experienced that. So, I guess CalRecycle, you've got some public comments for us?
Yes, we have 2 more public comments. The first one is from Steve Laus, and it says, fantastic work from the labeling committee in the context of Commission's work in the National Sword and promoting the recovery of materials that processors can sell and that manufacturers can utilize to make products. That said, and in line with Commissioner Ward's comments, this elegant statewide approach will need to be integrated and reconciled with local program messaging, including the zero waste message. Keep up your great work on Recycling 2.0. The second comment is from Kelly Kramer, and that says, How to Recycle's recyclability categories for different package types are very closely aligned to the draft recyclables list put forth by the labeling committee. How to Recycle is happy to discuss our recyclability criteria in greater detail with the Commission at any time. Also see howtorecycle.info/guide. And those are the 2 comments.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ward.
Just adding to the potential glossary for the labeling committee to consider for words, you got landfill, trash, waste, and residual are all words that are used to describe this thing. And generally I like the word waste, just because it's such a bad word, and nobody wants to be described as waste. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Call it what it is.
Okay, so we've got, some people prefer waste, some landfill, but the general concept, it sounds like there's a lot of agreement on the general concepts of these, the outline. I don't see any more comments in the chat box. And I guess I'll just add that I really like the amazing hard work that's been done here. I know, Jan, you've put in many, many hours, and so has Commissioner Dunleavy, and I just think this is really going in a neat direction, and it keeps it nice and simple for the public and gets our recycling logos back under what will be meaningful. So I guess the question I have for all of you is, how would you like to proceed? Because this is the first time we've seen this, and there's a lot of people in the public that this is the first time they've seen it. So, and I know we're going to have more public comments on this, and it's a very big decision. This will impact manufacturers across the country because they usually cannot label just for California because we're 12% of the market. They would do it for the whole country. So this will overlap with other states, which are also in process of looking at some labeling. Do you have any suggestions? Do you think that maybe we just noodle on this and ask the public to weigh in and send us comments, and then we bring this up as an agenda item on the next commission meeting? Or would you, Commissioner Dunleavy, would you like this to go back to your committee to take some of the comments that you've gotten today, and probably more that will come, and revisit this?
So this is Commissioner Dell. I'm the chair of this committee. No, I think and we were the brave. First of all, I'd like to thank the whole committee, and Sarah Toyota in particular had the original brilliant brainstorm around you should know exactly what bin to put it in. And she said it should be simple, it should be smart. And then I found out Leonardo da Vinci actually already said that. So, but kudos to the whole committee because we've really spent time trying to get this right. No, this policy recommendation is now squarely in the commission, all 17 of us, to now consider, amend, revise, and make a policy recommendation on. And now the question, I think, goes back to you, Heidi and Richard. What is the process for this commission now to move forward with finalizing policy recommendations? And no, we aren't going to do that today. So I say we put a pin in this today. We let all the commissioners who haven't seen it think about it. And then we come back in the next commission meeting, and also with the next recycling policy that Jeff's, Commissioner Dunleavy, is about to make. Same question. How do you move this forward? There is no go back to a committee now. This is now a move forward to this commission. And what is our process to now get commission consensus to move this into a policy recommendation to meet those deadlines in the report? Thank you.
I think one of the things we could do is, we've discussed a couple of things today that we might be able to get agreement on and kind of finalize in regards to whether we call it trash or landfill or waste. Is that something that would be helpful to give more specificity if we can agree on a couple of these terms?
You know, I think we should put a pin in it, and you and I should have a discussion. And this goes for any policy recommendation moving forward. There's going to be overarching aspects of the policy and then details around which word, right? And so I think we need to have a process for discussing this again at the next commission, working through maybe specific items to vote on, but we need to not just go at this ad hoc, but actually have a process to review the policy recommendations.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And maybe Vice Chair Valle and I can discuss this with Cal Recycle too at our meeting immediately following this, and then I can call you, Commissioner Dell, and we can talk about how to bring this up at the next meeting with specific items that we should try to decide that would help refine this down and get it tighter and tighter. And also we'll look at the public comments that come in to see how they're advising us as well. So we can, but I think this will probably go through the washer a couple of times through the commission. because this is a very, very big decision.
And this isn't just for this policy recommendation, but the same process you have to set up for the other policy recommendations that will be coming through. When they come to the full commission, how do we address them? How do we work through the details? What level of detail do we work through? And then when do we vote? And then what is consensus in a passing vote?
I asked the commissioners, is there anyone who has a vehement opposed position to the general direction that has been laid out here? Commissioner Valle, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that when we first introduce these kinds of questions with very specific information such as this, it's really critical that we put it out into the public and then let them look at it, give us feedback, then revisit after they've had ample time. We need to really make sure that the public is fully informed before we make any tentative decisions at all.
Yeah, and because these couldn't get posted in advance, that was a real problem. And I guess I'm wondering if I should go back to the order in the chat box maybe, and then let everybody speak to that, because I think that's generally where we got to go, is we just got to let this sit and let people comment on it. Commissioner Dunleavy, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you. I think the labeling committee has reviewed this, and as Commissioner Dell said, moved it up to the commission level. So I think we should address it and absolutely avoid items coming to the commission, back to committee, up to the commission. With the policies that we're going to be recommending, they're not going to be the ultimate laws. You know, a great leader said we need to put a man on the moon. He didn't say what size rocket, how many people. He just set the goal. And I think the policy recommendation coming out of the commission is going to be standardized labeling for products. That's going to move up to the legislature, and they're going to engineer the policy and the law up there. There'll be a lot more meetings, a lot more opportunities for input, and what ultimately happens hopefully will reflect a lot of our discussions. But ultimately, we hope they listen to our recommendation for standardized labeling or standardized material lists. So I don't think we need to get way down into the weeds on the shape, size, color, location. I'm sure that'll be helpful to the legislature, but I think for our group, the higher level, agree on a recommended policy for standardized labels to identify recyclable and compostable material. I think probably the next commission meeting, we could all come to a consensus and move this as the first policy recommendation out of the commission up to the legislature. So that's my comments.
All right, Commissioner Schneider, I think you're next.
To address your original question, are we in consensus? Is there anybody adamantly opposed? I'm not adamantly opposed. However, I do feel slightly railroaded, and I'm on the marketing and labeling committee. That said, I'm sitting here going, all right, I can reach out to the recycling coordinators in the 3 cities in our dual stream system, but how many other groups, how many other programs, city-based programs and or service provider programs need to look at how they're going to do the local ad labeling? And I don't have within my power to reach out to those communities to find out what does the local ad really mean if we move this to the state legislator. I disagree with Mr. Dunleavy. I think if we're going to make recommendations, it should say from now on, recycling is blue, composting is green, and landfill, etc., is some other color. I think we should provide that kind of direction. But I don't know how to reach out to the community. I'm looking that we've got 23 or 24 people out of 151 max on this call. I am doubtful that my service provider, who handles multiple cities, by the way, it's not just my one tiny city, if they're on this call, because they're working, but how do we reach out to them to find out how the local ad would work? And I would want to know how that works before I vote on something.
Very good point. I think there's a lot of unknowns with that particular part right now. So unless there's anybody else who wants to speak to that, I think that Commissioner Davis, you wanted to say something about the local ad?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to clarify. If a committee brings a recommendation forward, but there's parts of the recommendation that are unresolved or left open, that means the commission then needs to do the committee's work. I think it is appropriate to continue to hold discussions around topics at the committee if they're unresolved. And I would not be comfortable advocating the committee's role for that.
Okay, so it sounds like the committee had a slight disagreement maybe on this issue, and now it's escalated up to the full commission to discuss. This is the first time we've seen it, the first time the public's seen it, and they've heard the different opinions. So I think we just proceed hearing more of the comments from the commissioners and the public, and then we can decide what to do at the end. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, and just a suggestion to address Commissioner Dell's question about how do we move forward with these kind of policies. I think that's one of the reasons why I was trying to emphasize that each committee assigns specific authors of each section, because then as these sections are brought forth, I trust all of the commissioners to take seriously every commissioner's comment. And so it seems reasonable to bring these forward, have a full discussion, and then bring it back to that committee and that author to try to refine what they've put in and get it into a form that might be accepted by the full commission. And then we can start zeroing in on additional areas of objection. But I don't think it's realistic to have all of these different policy proposals brought forth and then just handed to the commission as a whole. It's not clear how we move forward from that point. So I think that there's two choices. Either it bounces back to the original committee that it started with, or we have to find ways to refer sections of this to other specific other committees. For instance, I can see the Organics Committee commenting on the compost correctly section, but I don't see that there's any conflicts at this point, but I think that's the way forward. Essentially, it starts with the committee, comes to the commission, it bounces back to the authors in that committee, and then comes back to the commission as refined. That would be my.
Well, if I may respond to that, that will set up an infinite do loop. And we have in the previous, I believe it was exactly the previous commission meeting where there was concern by some commission members who weren't on a committee that said, wait, you can't bake everything in the committee. You can't make all the decisions there. You need to bring it up to the full discussion. And on the label committee, there's 6 people. There's 17 people on this commission. And to keep bouncing it back and then refining one little thing and then bring it back up and changing it is an infinite do loop, which will never come to a conclusion. And so this is the first one. We're the brave ones coming forward with this. But I think we should put a pin in it, take it offline, and have the discussion that maybe there's an overarching agreement that can be made at some level. And then there might be small little elements that could go back to the committee. But then to pounce this all back to the committee now puts it back months. And again, then we'll bring it back again, and then we'll have the same discussion. Then it will be bounced back again. So it won't, and that's not a path to conclusion.
I tend to agree with that thought. So I think the next person who had comments was Commissioner Toyota, and then
Was that,
yeah,
did you say my name?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Segura, I didn't see your, I see next was Toyota, Valle, Sky, Davis, Schneider, and then you, sorry.
No worries,
You broke up, so I thought you said my name, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll wait my turn.
I'll speak up. Okay, thanks.
Heidi, I was in the queue too, so whenever there's a chance.
So I just think it would be great when we started this conversation, part one, the organics came up, and I was looking at what they brought forward, and it was almost like policy, and I was thinking about the marketing, which is much more broad, and then seeing this, which is it's I guess broad but different, and I'm just wondering if we could come to some agreement or get some direction on what you want brought forward, or what the committees need to bring to the whole commission that we can start working on, because we're all bringing different things and we're coming in with different details. So is it more policy writing that you like, or more broad ideas like, I mean, this isn't just a broad idea, but more broad thinking like this is that needs to be worked out? And when you guys go back and kind of talk maybe in the like agenda item 5 for reporting, what at the end is the goal and what do we bring forward here so that we can make those decisions to move forward?
I think what I'm hearing is, I mean, basically what we're doing is creating something from scratch. So anytime we do that, it's really up to us to make those decisions as a group. I'm just the chair, Richard's just the vice chair, but 17 of us really make up this commission, and we don't dictate to the group how this is going to go. We all decide together. So I mean, my thought was that you guys as committees bring forward recommendations the way you discuss them. And that's how this first one came. And you did an amazing job as a committee coming up with a really detailed proposal with really good background and really good PowerPoints. And now we've got a very big, very impactful proposal in front of us for the first time. And I think everybody's trying to figure out, what do we do with this thing? But I think the number one thing, as Commissioner Valle said, is we've got to hear from the public. And actually, Commissioner Schneider said the same thing. We've got to hear from people how this is going to land and if they have input for us. So my suggestion is we'll take the rest of the commissioners' comments on this and any more public comment, and then Commissioner Valle and I will talk with Cal Recycle, and then probably go back and discuss maybe that there's certain parts of this that seem like there's agreement, and the parts that there may be some discussion, we might want to kick that back, those couple of specific things to the committee, but we might not. We might decide that this is a full commission discussion now, because ultimately we need, we're shooting for consensus. So if all of you are out of the loop of the discussion of the committee, it's going to have to be brought back up again anyway with us as a whole group. That's my thinking. So we'll just go through the rest of the comments and then see where we land here. So thank you, Commissioner Toyota, and we'll turn over to Commissioner Veit.
I was thinking of Commissioner Dell's comment to put a pin in it. If we weren't in COVID and we were at an event, and let's say it's a 4-day event and we're in a hotel, and our committee was empowered to do something like this, we would have a discussion, and then we would have things posted on the wall. We would come back the next day and revisit it again. At the end of the convention or the event or workshop, after 4 days, we'd come out with a finished product and present it at the event for the bigger audience. So Jan's description metaphor, if you will, putting a pin in it is good. I'm going to pretend it's on the wall, it's sitting there, but we need the public to really weigh in and then come back and revisit it as a full commission. So I think that's in itself is a good process that we can start with every item that comes forward, because this is the first time I've seen it, and I'm sure there's other people who are not present who want to jump in and give us their perspective.
And I'm going to say we're going to probably have to call this discussion because we've got 2 other committees, and we're already at 11:45 and only have 45 minutes left. So unless there's a commissioner that feels very strongly that they need to say something right now about this item, not just the process. Yes, Commissioner Sky?
It's about this as well as the process, and it's just important because I want to echo some of the sentence and hopefully put together a path forward. We absolutely public feedback on these proposals is very important, but I want to echo Commissioners Dunleavy and Dell about not kicking things back. the intent is for us to come up with proposals that ultimately would come into legislation or be enacted through regulations. We don't have to have every single detail worked out. If it's 90% and we have consensus on the framework and on most of the details, and we all agree that there should be a logo for what goes into the trash bin, but we don't know whether to call it trash or landfill or waste, that detail does not need to be in our proposal. We just kick it to the folks that will ultimately make that decision, and whatever we come to consensus with, we come forward. So my specific recommendation is when a proposal comes to the commission discusses it. I think we should absolutely identify where we have consensus. We should only kick things back to the committees if there's a fatal flaw or they're not really ready. But if there's mostly consensus, then we should say this is something we'll consider at the next full commission meeting. It provides an opportunity for the public to weigh in, give their feedback. We'll finalize it at the next commission meeting, and then we have a vote.
Sounds good. And we can also make the agenda items much more specific. We'll know what we're talking about on the items, because right now it just says report out and recommendations, but we can be a lot more specific, and that will hopefully help people follow. So I'll turn it over to CalRecycle to make sure we wrap up the public comments. And whoever has their speaker on, if you could, there you go, thanks. There's a little feedback. So CalRecycle, can you read any public comments in, please?
Yes, we have 2 remaining public comments for this. So the first one is from Doug Cobald, and it says, thank you for the opportunity to comment on item number 9 that was discussed during the full commission meeting this morning. CPSC, the California Product Stewardship Council, has been working on the issue of the chasing arrows since December 2018 and would be happy to flesh out ideas with the labeling committee at a future committee meeting. We will include more information about the ideas that CPSC was floating publicly in January 2019 and a presentation slide related to the same during the CRRA conference in August 2019 in a formal comment letter to be submitted. If the labeling committee would like CPSC to join in the discussion, please feel free to contact Doug, and his contact information is there.
I just suggest to CPSC, they go ahead and submit their recommendations on labeling to the portal so everybody can see it. That's the fastest way to make sure everybody sees the comments, including the public. And the next comment, please.
Is from Steve Wilkes, and this is regarding statewide framework versus local ad messaging. Would it not make sense to have the proposed rubric anchor a statewide education campaign with a recommendation for it to be the basis of any planned revision of local messaging, but not require it to replace local messaging or currently listed materials? That's the comment.
With that, I think we've got to move on to the next committees, or else we're not going to get through those report outs, and we've had a really good discussion on this. So I want to thank the commissioners, and especially want to thank Chair Dell. You've done an amazing job with this labeling committee and the committee members themselves. So thank you so much for all your work. Okay, so we'll turn it now over to the Commissioner Dunleavy on the recycling committee, because these two were dovetailing together. So you can go for it, Chairman Dunleavy.
All righty, thank you. Definitely an active meeting. Audrey or Kate, does somebody have the slides that I have that I sent you that you could share with everybody? So just an update on our last meeting, if you can go to the next slide. Doing the online meetings, very active. During the meeting, we had 13 different people submit a total of 52 comments. And we're trying to respond to as many of those as we can, either through the meeting or afterwards with emails, and all the input is definitely valuable. This is what we've come up with as our first recommendation from the recycling committee, is the initial what is recyclable in California list. And with the help of several committee members going through a matrix looking at the 7 different items that we had talked about. These are the items that we were finding are recyclable in California today. And these would be the ones that get the recyclable in California label. And we definitely want to put a premium on that, because these are items that have available markets. they have good value, and all the MRFs are separating them and able to market that material. There's some items that I didn't mention before, whether it's a local ad or they're not on this list, but they want to be on this list. We've gotten a response from some of the stakeholders that items are acceptable in bales of material, but they're saying they're acceptable as an acceptable outthrow. We've heard from a plastic producer that has PET bottles that have metal necks and metal caps. That plastic bottle is an outthrow. It ultimately ends up in the garbage, and that's something that we don't want to have a recycling symbol on, because it might be acceptable as a contaminant, but ultimately it ends up in the garbage. So we only want items on the list that are separated at the MRFs into a grade that's marketable, and then it has value and can be turned into a new product. So if you go to the next slide, and for the sake of time, I'll go through these slides and then we'll come back to the discussion on the list. We also had some discussion on items that would be local ads. These would be items that would not get the Recyclable in California symbol, but they're items that local municipalities and programs could add, provided their program is doing a separation of the material and marketing them separately. A simple example is aluminum foil. Some programs are doing pots and pans and selling them as a scrap metal item. PET thermoforms is an interesting one because there's some MRFs that have optical sorters that are kicking out a lot of them. Some of them are separating them, some of them are not. Those that are separating them into thermoform bales, those are the programs that should be including them. Those that are mixing them with the PET bottles as an acceptable item, those thermoforms ultimately end up in the garbage because they're damaged through multiple processing. So this is the local ad list. And again, these are items that would not get the Recyclable in California label at this point. And the recycling committee will work on a pathway that the manufacturers would know how they could get to the Recyclable in California level. And it might include producers committed to using so much post-consumer content, making sure that there's available processing capacity, whether it's in California or domestically, or if it does go to an export market, ensuring that it is going to a location that is using safe environmental practices in converting that item. So if we go to the next slide. So we've gone through the matrix and we've sent that off to all the commissioners, and we've come up with the simple green, yellow, red as an examples. With the fiber grades, these are all items that have passed with the 76 MRFs that we've surveyed. There are some in the yellow category. I always talk about pizza boxes because that's an item that is going in some composting bins, and there are some recycling programs that have pizza boxes, and if cardboard gets up to $200 a ton, again, people are going to want to sell that as a cardboard grade, if possible, if it's clean and dry. So if we go to the next slide. With the metal products, we think it was pretty clear on those that could pass with aluminum beverage containers and steel cans. Aluminum foil and steel pots and pans were one. As I'm looking at this, what I don't see as a local ad, but probably should be, would be cat food cans. So that might fall in the aluminum foil or other aluminum container types as a possible local ad. Again, provided that the facility is separating those and not mixing those with aluminum can bales because of the contamination issues. So if we go on to the next slide, glass products, pretty simple. bottles and jars, no discussion on local ads on that. Next slide. Then when we got to plastics, a lot of discussion on those. Number 1 and number 2, narrow neck bottles with a twist on or snap on lid. Those were actively recycled and accepted. A lot of discussion on other plastics that could be considered local ads. And those are ones that we hope that the stakeholders and the manufacturers will begin the discussion on how they can either go from a local ad to a recyclable in California through infrastructure, creating markets to buy the material at a value that pays for the separation in collection, so the cost is not borne strictly by the consumer or the haulers and processors. So we hope that those that are not on the Recycle in California list open up the discussions on how they can get there. And part of it is creating the markets, the demand, and the value for the material that pays for the processing and collection. So if we go to the next slide. So this is what we're bringing to the commission today, is our draft recommendation for consideration to move forward on what we think are the 15 items that are truly recyclable in California. They're collected through the curbside programs. They're collected at recycling centers. They're separated into their own material type. They're reprocessed into new items, and they do have market demand, market value that helps pay for the collection and processing. So the entire cost of recycling is not on the consumers. So with that, I would open it up for discussion on this.
Okay, and I think our first commenter is John Davis.
So, yeah, Commissioner Donnelly, could you go up one slide to the slide 8? Yeah, and so the number 5 PP polypropylene jars and rigid containers, the MRF acceptance rate is 71%. That would mean that 71% of MRFs in California accept those. And is that based on that's based on the revised Excel information that you received?
Yes.
And I wonder, would it be possible, because I'd just like to take a look once again. I've been kind of focused on that number. I mean, it's probably within the margin of error, but if you manage to survey all 100% of the MRFs, then maybe that margin's lower. But I guess my request would be at least if I could take one more look at the Excel sheet, because that seems pretty close to. It wasn't on the list of even the local option alternatives, but it's getting pretty close to being in the green.
Yeah, and with that, understandably, a lot of the curbside programs are accepting number 5, whether it's bottles or rigid containers. But some of the criteria.
If I could say something here is show.
Can't hear you, Jan. Jan, we can't hear you. Oh, there you go.
Okay, I thought I was interrupting. So, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, so Commissioner Dunleavy, Commissioner Dunleavy, really quickly, Commissioner Dunleavy is just showing one column of the spreadsheet that had 7 criteria. So MRF acceptance isn't the only criteria of what is recyclable. Maybe Commissioner Dunleavy, you want to address, so it was the first criteria, but it wasn't the market criteria of is there any buyer for that material. There's 6 other criteria behind the columns that are being shown in these slides.
Yes, and where most items fell off the recyclable in California list was accepted at recycling centers, sorted separately at the MRFs, in stable markets. PP5, the bottles are accepted at recycling centers. but rigid containers typically are not accepted at recycling centers because there's no value for the material. Currently, the market for PP number 5 is very low, limited, or it doesn't exist. We know of one processor in the United States that accepts and buys PP number 5, but one player in the United States doesn't generate a market or a demand that creates value for recyclers to pay for the processing and collection. So that's where a lot of items fell off, is they're not accepted at recycling centers, not separated individually at the MRFs, and the availability of markets. So when the producers create additional markets and demand, that's when they can find the pathway to get on that list. So PP5 has had a lot of discussion, and we hope to talk to those producers in the future about getting them onto the list, but it's creating the demand so that material, whether it's from a recycling center or a MRF, has value to pay for the collection. Right now, the PP5 bottles that are going through the recycling centers are all subsidized by the bottle bill. There's no scrap value for that material for the recyclers. So it depends on state subsidies, and we want to move away from that where the producers create the demand where there's value for the material. So.
Wait, can I hang on a second, John? Jeff, I want to make sure we're being transparent about how we came up with this list. And it sounded like there's a checklist that needs to be made public so that everybody can see, because we've already received comments that they don't understand how we created this list, and obviously that will be very important to defending it.
Yeah, and with that, we've posted the criteria. Commissioner Lapis brought it up at one of our first meetings, but it is the 7 criteria listed under Public Resources Code 42370.2. And that identifies the 7 criteria. And that has been posted at committee meetings. It's attached to the matrix is the intro tab, and we have presented it publicly.
Davis, you were going to chime in, but I've got other people in line.
Just to quickly finish. Well, in not seeing the polypropylene number 5s on the short list of possible locally collected materials. That's what first struck me. So I think we recognize that it is being recycled and sold, at least in some localities. Apparently 71% of the MRFs are doing it. So.
Commissioner Schneider, you're next.
If you go to the slide that talked about metals, this is something that came up on market development yesterday. I understand that what Recycling Committee and the labeling component of it are trying to help fix the problem at curbside. However, if you look at metal recycling, it's always bothered me in my 40 years in this field of how poor we do at scrap metal recycling from the curbside. And yet there are huge energy inputs into raw material extraction and huge environmental devastation from raw material extraction. So I looked at that. Yeah, I get it. I get that the sorting lines have a difficulty with a hanger or anything else. But, and this might be for a future discussion a year from now or next July, is how are we encouraging the true recyclability, the true circular economy of materials that have huge environmental impacts like metal that are reusable over and over again. I'm not going to argue for plastics, but for metals, I see we're doing an immediate fix, but I don't want to lose sight that the long-term, all metals should be recycled. And that means all the cell phone components that have really rare minerals in them that are hugely devastating to developing nations to collect those raw materials. So if we can put that in a future tickle file, I will stop being the median contrarian.
Yeah, with that, scrap metal on a tonnage basis is probably the most recycled item in the world. Coming from residential locations, yeah, the material is recyclable. But going through the carts, going through the trucks, going through the processing system, I think there's great risk to all of those. and the development of take-back programs need to be developed, whether it's a drop-off or going to a recycling center. With what Jared had mentioned earlier about the initiative coming up and some of the discussions that we've had on the recycling committee is to alleviate the burden of the curbside programs to not be the first line of collection and recycling. There needs to be other options for different types of materials. We can't start putting batteries and cell phones and single-use plastics, everything into a curbside bin because we'll get back to, you know, a situation where the material coming through those programs is highly contaminated. So we're trying to recommend a simpler curbside recycling program, and then we'll get to the drop-off and other collection programs for the other items that are recyclable.
Thank you, because that's exactly what I think, and I know you're not going to lose sight of it, Chair Donlevy, but having lived just a few miles from Stanford's drop-off where I could do so many things, but we've lost so many of the drop-offs. And I think that we need to be working on a recommendation, and it may not have to be every local jurisdiction, but jurisdictions combined together to do this. Yeah. And if we need to, we put it on our own public yard or main yards. And that recommendation comes down to that, to us as local government, to make sure that these other options are there, as important as the loss of the redemption value locations. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's where Jared talked about the funding, and with an initiative, that might be an option to promote more drop-off programs because those are very costly on a per-ton basis. That's why you've seen so many move away from those and try and put them into the curbside programs. So I think we'll get to that.
Just so that everybody knows, I've already gone to my city manager because of our low-income community can't redeem their cans and bottles. If we could set it up at our sewage treatment plant. A lot of our communities have sewage treatment plants with fairly large asphalted surfaces that could be short-term tasked over.
We can also, we'll have to move on, but other countries actually make the producers pay for those drop-off centers, like Returnit, and yeah, so that the local governments aren't footing this entire bill because it is extremely expensive. And that should be, you know, considered as right now an externalized cost. Commissioner Sky.
Before my comment, I just want to say, boy, what a testimonial for producer responsibility that we really need it. And not to offend any of my colleagues in the waste collection industry, but curbside collection is not the solution for every product. We definitely need other options. My comment regarding this list is that we want the recycling label to be a living document so that there is a mechanism to add things to it in the future, but I think we'd agree that we don't want to give customers whiplash in terms of what's recyclable from day to day. And my concern is that there's items here that have had markets in the past and maybe because of China and other reasons have a diminished market right now. And to put a label of trash or landfill or whatever we decide on those products will probably ensure that they never get recovered. So I hope that we certainly should have a very stringent standard for what we label as recyclable, but I think I would recommend that we be more lenient with things that are local add or not labeled so that there is an opportunity for those markets to be established and for the investment to be made, frankly, whether it's from metal recyclers or plastics or any other commodity. I think that we're creating a system that is going to incentivize both manufacturers and recyclers to decide whether to shift to different product types or make the investment to recover more so that they don't go down the path of being labeled as trash.
I'm going to have to cut this off, unfortunately, because we still haven't heard from the Market Development Committee, and we're literally only 20 minutes away from the end of the meeting. So I'm going to ask that the CalRecycle staff please read into the record the public comments we've just received.
And Heidi, if I could get just 2 more slides just to get them up publicly and then ask the commissioners for comments, if they could contact me or Commissioner Oseguera just on some ideas.
I'm sorry, was there more slides? I'm sorry.
Just a couple more slides. towards the end, we are going to start addressing bottle bill problems and solutions. Jared was helpful with it. He talked about dealer. Go back. There we go. I think we're hitting the mark on what Jared was talking about. Dealer take back, convenient zones, underserved areas. We are going to be looking at materials with low redemption rates, and then appointing an oversight committee to CalRecycle. It appeared that Jared was referencing a short-term fix and then possibly a stewardship organization. So I'd like to get more thoughts or comments from other commissioners not on the recycling committee, ideas on bottle bill problems and solutions. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm sorry, a couple of commissioners, we aren't going to be able to get to your comments today. So hopefully you can get those directly to Mr. Dunleavy. And so
Heidi, this is McElkoff. One quick comment I want to add to Mr. Dunleavy. Out of the subcommittee, it was not 100% consensus on that list going into the full commission. We brought it to the commission to have a further discussion. I want to make that on the record. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a very important point. That's what I heard too when I was listening to the committee. Okay, CalRecycle comments?
Yes, we have two short public comments. The first one is from Janet Fernandez, and she says, hi, thank you for all this great information. I believe you have mentioned this previously, but will the PowerPoints and materials be available for the public to review, and where will they be located on the website?
Please respond to, actually, can CalRecycle please respond to that as far as what you're going to be able to post, because that's really where this accessibility problem has fallen. I think the committee chairs can email the documents that they have to people who request it, and you can request those also through the email address and the portal, I believe. But this has really mucked us up, this accessibility standard. We tried to get everything posted before this meeting and basically could post almost nothing, which has been really, really hard for everybody. CalRecycle, is there, because it's going to take you days to translate all this, correct, and make it accessible? They're probably talking amongst themselves, but generally that's my understanding. So we can go on from there, and if anybody has any questions and they want to get something that they haven't gotten from a committee, you can just email me directly, heidi@nsaction.us. I will make sure you get it. Okay, and then the second comment?
The second comment is from Randy Pollock, and it was the rigid plastic packaging container law reviewed as part of this process, and what happens to this law if this is adopted? And
Does anybody want to respond to that? Mr. Dunleavy? Have you taken up the RPPC rule?
No, that's something that we can look at.
Yeah, it is an existing law, so it would be good to figure out how that would work with the new proposal. Thank you for that comment.
And Chair Sanborn, actually one just came in as well. It's short. For Doug Cobald, the matrix reflects that PP number 5 bottles are accepted at MRF, as are the other plastic resins number 3, 4, 6, and 7, but are the number 3 through 7s actually being diverted from landfill? Buyback centers are accepting all CRV-related containers as required by law and providing the deposit refund to the consumer. However, MRFs are not refunding deposits to consumers, rather reporting CRV-related materials recycled to CalRecycle. As we all heard recently, the Division of Recycling is no longer requiring cities and counties to require all CRV containers to be included in curbside recycling in order to receive the annual city-county payments. Should the matrix be reflecting buyback-related acceptance separately from MRFs processing single-stream recycling?
Okay, and I would encourage the public again, if you have very specific recommendations, to please submit those through the portal, make sure everybody, because that's what gets uploaded and all the public can see it, and including all the commissioners, and we all review them before the meetings. So thank you very much. And I know we've got to move on to even talk about the Recycling and Market Development Committee work. So I'm going to suggest that we put the pin in this one as well, just like we did with the other agenda item. And then we will come back to this at the next commission meeting. Is there anybody who has any disagreement with that? Or I think we've kind of agreed that that's the process we'll take. Thumbs up. Everybody is all right? Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, and thank you again, Chairman Don Levy and the Recycling Committee. Great, amazing work. Last committee report out is Chairman Davis of the Market Development Committee, and we've only got about 5 to 8 minutes for the presentation, so, and then comments, of course, so thank you.
I think Cal Recycle staff has a document to show. Yeah, so I guess yesterday at Market Development, we had that same issue about having documents available prior to the meeting. But we did work our way through. So we've taken a little different approach. We used a couple subcommittees. We started with a long list of bulleted preliminary recommendations, about 5 or 6 dozen of them, and then started writing narrative around it. But you can scroll down, Kate, to it's an introduction to the concept of market development being the pull. We've got supply that is coming through collection and processing, but if there's no place to send it, the material lags, but a strong demand actually creates pull. So what we're trying to focus on is that demand side, which is the first element. Scroll down under the Public Resources Code, and it's number 1. It begins recommendations that I kind of mentioned earlier around this consolidated permit process at Cal EPA. And the idea here would be that significant projects that are kind of facility size optimized or geographically important, be pulled into this consolidated permitting process. And then the second variation is that the consolidated permitting process involves local government and not just the state agency. So the consolidated permitting process allows the Cal EPA to designate an agency that's responsible for shepherding permits through all the state agency permit processes, including water boards and air districts. So if you want to scroll down, Kate, we don't have much time to linger on these, and we felt at the committee yesterday, since we hadn't shared this adequately and publicly, that we didn't want to bring it to you without having vetted it through the public process. So anyway, this consolidated permitting process, just keep moving it, Kate, down to So what we felt, there's a series of recommendations around the entry point, to have a clear entry point from Cal EPA, to allow Cal Recycle to initiate the process for permits. There was an item added yesterday to start tracking permits that are in process, to try to get a handle on where these lie. We wanted to address some of the local issues. There was a lot of updates to general plan guidelines from the Office of Planning Research as a result of a Cal EPA Institute of Local Government in League of Cities project a few years ago. But we think we could still enhance that, just keep going down. And also try to provide some updated CEQA guidance to local governments when they're considering projects. This whole idea of trying to mesh local and state agency is not just the permit process itself, but also the exchange of knowledge. So you don't end up having different people viewing projects through a different lens. Try to get people on the same lens, so that you come into a local government agency, they've never dealt with a compost facility before. Suddenly they're trying to answer questions and deal with that, where we've got knowledge in state agencies that can help with that. The Governor's Office of Business Systems and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz, has a big role to play. It was described to the committee from Cal Recycle presentations. And so we've got some very specific kind of small, very focused recommendations around the GoBiz process, but including GoBiz in that consolidated permitting process, so that the Governor's Office initiate projects. Let the governor's office be a part of that, because that leads to access to financing to help with site selection. Permitting is already a function of the governor's office. This consolidated permitting process has been on the books since 1997, and we have yet to find a project that even entered the process, let alone managed its way through. But GoBiz works on permitting, so let GoBiz initiate that process and work within the framework. There's some other items here that we need to elaborate a little further, but why don't you go down quickly, Kate, and we'll try to get to the, yeah, keep going. So this is where we stopped on recommendations for discussion yesterday, but then yesterday we added the state agency Buy Recycle campaign and specific recommendations that really came out of a CalRecycle annual report. And so we're comfortable moving forward with these. I clarified one, if you want to go down a little bit further. Yeah, number 27. There's a need to codify the enforcement mechanism based on CalRecycle's established process for non-compliant agencies. The legislation that created the state agency Buy Recycle campaign does not have enforcement. So the enforcement is actually a negotiated process between CalRecycle and the agencies. And so the recommendation was to codify that based on CalRecycle's established process, and then CalRecycle's language said to enact it reflecting the process, but there may be a need to strengthen it. And just real quickly, if you want to go up to, I think, the first one. Yeah, the life cycle analyses. I've heard reference to this. I think there was a question about this. You know, start to look at the overall environmental impact of products, and the state agency Buy Recycle campaign is a place that we can enter into to create demand, which is the second element of the statute for market development. But life cycle analyses are a way to begin to fully understand the impacts of projects. So we're not saying based on life cycle analyses. The state of Oregon recommendation is also to begin to build a database of knowledge around product life cycle analyses that we can begin to utilize. So there you go, Heidi. I think I'm on time. But we'll bring these forward to the committee. I think our intention today was to let you see that we're making progress around some specific issues, and B, the way we're presenting it by bulleting and numbering these, it lets us easily modify, pull out, or add to the list. And that's how we'll bring it forward to you.
Thank you. And I think this will be, obviously we won't have a whole lot of time to discuss this. It's the first time the public and the commission is seeing it. And we're going to discuss this, Vice Chair and I, with CalRecycle immediately following this meeting, how we get all these documents to you so you can all review them quietly, do track changes and edit. Can we use the Google Doc, as Commissioner Lapis reminded us we talked about. So this is not, again, the last time you'll see it, but we do need to start thinking about how to finalize some of these things up. And I can say, at least for me, the state agency Buy Recycle campaign to me is low-hanging fruit. That program could create millions of dollars of market pull for a whole bunch more materials than they have now with public money. And getting that program updated based on the CalRecycle recommendations and a few others from the committee, I think could really make a difference next year and be something that hopefully everybody could support, including the manufacturers, because that would create that demand for those recycled products, recycled content products. Anybody have any comments? I think there's public comment. We'll have to take that first and then see if we have time for any more comments.
Yes, it's a public comment related to previous public comment from Randy Pollock from the last presentation, and the question is not about the criteria, but what data was relied on for these outcomes.
Oh, for the list for the recycling, what's in and what's out?
For the rigid plastic packaging container law, was his previous comment. So it's the two comments together are, was the rigid plastic packaging container law reviewed as part of this process, and what happened to this law if this is adopted? And the second comment that came in was, the question is not about the criteria, but what data was relied on for these outcomes.
Okay, well, that was somebody else's comment actually that I had brought up, but I think that will be responded to by the whole committee in future meetings, and I think Chair Donlevy heard it. Okay, very good. Are there any commissioners that have any thoughts or feedback on the Market Development Committee's preliminary work here and presentation? I don't see any in the comments. So this would be another one that we are going to put a pin in then. We'll get you this information so you have more time to read it, and then hopefully get your feedback, and then this will come back to the next commission meeting on the 21st of October. And with that, we've only got 5 minutes, 6 minutes left in the meeting, and this literally cuts off because of the agenda being time certain until 12:30. So before we get cut off, I want to just turn quickly. It looks like we've got a couple commissioners that just put in comments. So Commissioner Segura, real quick.
Yeah, I'll try to do it very quickly. So I think it's extremely important to highlight, Chairperson Sanborn, that we do need a process of how things will get then to making into a final decision. And I think that'd be extremely important. You mentioned doing that, so just want to highlight that that's extremely important. The other thing is Commissioner Valle made a very important comment in terms of making sure we receive input. As we receive more input, it will make sure that the public feels that they have had their say in terms of what's happening. I think Kelly PA Secretary Blumenfeld made a great comment in terms of collaboration and input, and I think if you do that together, that does create the collaboration. And then one last thing, just making sure that as we put in our asterisks, then making sure that everybody does get to a point. I know we ran out of time, but when we're rushed and we can't then provide our opinion, it just seems that we're jumping in trying to say something, and it just appreciated that we all get our opportunity to provide comment. Thank you.
Commissioner Ward?
This is for a suggestion for next agenda items.
Okay, hang on just a second. Commissioner Valle, do you have anything before the next agenda items?
This is for next agenda item as well.
Okay, so that's the next agenda item 10 is what is for the future agenda. And what I heard is we've got to bring these big policy recommendations back. So that to me would be the first thing for the committees that provided policy recommendations today. And then I have some other things, but I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ward first and then Commissioner Valle.
Thank you, Chair Sanborn. So as I've been considering the structure of the report, I'm recognizing there are categories of experts that are not included amongst our commissioners. Now, I haven't completely formed this proposal in my mind yet, which is kind of why I want to flesh it out at a future meeting. I know we're all pretty overwhelmed by the number of meetings and committees, but I think we also need to acknowledge that there are some really important topic areas that have relation to our recommendations that are not being included in our considerations. So I'm wondering if we can find a way to incorporate more representative professionals with expertise in being perhaps underrepresented, considering the variety of businesses engaged in aspects of salvage, reuse, repair, restoration, resale, manufacture, using secondary materials or brokering those, many details associated with domestic scrap, electronics recovery and repair, construction and demolition, debris recovery, comparative economic incentives for extraction as compared to reuse and recovery industries, and green chemistry. So though there are many areas that perhaps might be addressed, we know that we need to have a workable structure, and it's hard enough to manage our 17 commissioners and 4 committees that we have already. So perhaps other commissioners have had similar thoughts, that there might be an important aspect of the challenge of reaching 75% that's not being addressed, and that there might be a way to do better. So I'd like to discuss at the future meeting the possibility for the commissioners the Commission's recommendations to include legislative advocacy for ways to effectively engage experts in additional specific areas of expertise, whether that be through the suggestion that additional commissioners be solicited or appointed, or if this group feels that the topic merits discussion, that we find another way to advocate that in January.
I'm sorry to cut you off. You've got 2 minutes left and we haven't discussed the next agenda item, and we've got Commissioner Valle.
Real quick, 2 items. Secretary Blumenfeld mentioned 2 things. Collaboration with League of California Cities and the California State Association of Counties. I'd like to put that on the agenda. We need those partners to come forward and back us when we go forward. So put that on the agenda, please.
Great. And I was thinking a bigger item regarding this is that I heard him say that we need to get more stakeholder support in order to move things in the next legislative session, and the process that we go through as a commission as far as advocating and working with the leadership in the Assembly and the Senate. And we've talked about inviting Kip Lipper and others, but maybe Commissioner Valle and I, if you're okay with it, can come up with some proposal and then something to shoot at, and we can put that on the agenda for this holistic, how do we operate in this world to get more people going in the same direction, and we can put that on the agenda. There's other, does that work for everybody, or if Richard and I do that? At least come up with a proposal and then we'll put it on the agenda. Okay, great. And then lastly, there's a few things that have come up that just don't have a home, and we need to do that. And I would propose again that Commissioner Valle and I look at those things and come up with some suggestions on how we deal with it. And then again, you guys can just tell us if we've hit the mark or we've missed it and how we would deal with them. Everything from repair to the HHW that seems to have no home. So
I think
that's
that
okay.
would address the suggestion I made.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, then I think we are literally at 12:30 before they cut us off. I just want to say, amazing. You are the Get It Done Commission. I'm super proud of everybody. The work that we're doing is amazing, and it's time consuming, and you all deserve an award. I wish I could give you one for all your time you've invested in this. We've got a long way to go, but we've come a long way too. So thank you all so much. We'll see you next 2 weeks. And thank you again for all your great work. Bye for now.